Roll call.
Harding. Here. Melton. Here. Palermo. Here. Festerson. Here. Gray. Here. Mr. President.
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for opening remarks by Council Member Brinker Harding.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Actually, please feel free to take a seat. I'm going to do the same. I've had some prepared comments, and I won't make you stand. That doesn't mean that they're really long. I just don't need to make you stand. First, I'd like to welcome Colleen Brennan to Omaha City Council. In a few minutes, she will be sworn in by the Honorable Judge Thomas Harmon to be the representative for District 5. I understand that there are some that have preferred another person to fill the vacancy for this position. I even voted for someone else. However, Colleen has been duly selected and will be a member of this city council. And like with every other council member, I will work with her. For we are a group of individuals with different backgrounds, different political philosophies, and different experiences working on behalf of the citizens with a common goal of moving our community forward. This is our first meeting of 2021. Much has been said about putting 2020 in the rearview mirror. Although I might not disagree with this desire, I'd like to look at this a little differently. Therefore, using the car metaphor, I'd like us all to look forward through the windshield we have in 2021. Let us take into view and look at the opportunities we have in front of us and those that we can create. Let us continue to work together and move our community forward. There's a book that I pick up and reread in whole or in parts from time to time, and the title is The Death of Common Sense, and it was written by Philip Howard. I wanted to read just a quick paragraph that I thought we should all consider. And it reads in part, quote, "We cannot create a hands-free system of governance. Law is supposed to be a framework, not an automated program for public choices. This truth cannot be repeated too often. Only people, not rules, can make good things happen. That is as true in government and in law as in every other activity. So let us go about our business and the responsibilities we have pledged to our constituents. Let us work together with common sense in 2021 and move Omaha forward." Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Harding. And as we begin our new year, I would echo those sentiments and ask prayers for a peaceful transition of power next week to the new President of the United States, both here in Omaha, in our state, and our country. Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you, and the Council welcomes you to this meeting of the Omaha City Council. As a courtesy to those in attendance and to facilitate the conduct of our business, we ask that you please turn off or silence all electronic devices. Madam Clerk.
Real quick, an affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted on a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers. Item 6, the Honorable Judge Thomas Harmon will administer the oath of office to Councilmember Colleen Brennan.
Welcome, Judge Harmon. If you'd please come down to the front of the dais with Colleen Brennan, and then please administer the oath, and thank you for coming over today. I know you're very busy.
Raise your right hand, please. Would you state your name? Ms. Brennan, do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the State of Nebraska, against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you will take this obligation freely, without mental reservation or for purpose of evasion, and that you will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of the office of council member according to the law to the best of your ability. And do you further swear or affirm that you will not knowingly commit any act of treason against the government of the United States or the state of Nebraska during such time that you are in this position? So help me God. Congratulations. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. That's the one and only time you'll hear the judge asking a lawyer that. Council Member Brennan, if you please take your seat. We usually, as a custom, afford new council members the opportunity to say a few words.
Okay. I just want to thank everybody for their support. This is such an honor, and I look forward to working with everybody and solving any problems that come along. And I'm just very grateful for this opportunity to serve our wonderful city. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Council Member Brennan, and welcome aboard. Madam Clerk.
Item 7, a resolution to approve the preliminary plat for 77th and Dodge, located south of 77th and Dodge Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 7 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents in the chamber? We'll move to the Zoom registrations. We have Mr. Ryan Blumpkin registered on behalf of Nebraska Furniture Mart, 800 South 72nd Street. And we have John Coolidge with the applicant from Lamp Ryerson, 14710 West Dodge Road. Madam Clerk, are they unmuted? Mr. Coolidge, please proceed.
Greetings, John Coolidge, Lamp Ryerson, 14710 West Dodge Road, civil engineer here on behalf of the applicant. This is the preliminary plat for the 77th and Dodge project, which is located west of Rose Blumpkin Drive and east of the Papillion Creek. And our project is to create several lots for some fast food and potentially a lot for the floor decor, which is a tiling Monday, and that final plat will go to Planning Board in February. And here to answer any questions that you might have.
Yes, Mr. Coolidge, you briefly went, an entire Zoom or video conferencing went blank when you were talking about the tile store.
Just to repeat, Floor Decor is a tile store that actually I was watching a Discovery Channel last night, and they went to Floor Decor on one of those shows. But anyway, it'll be new to the Omaha market, and it'll be an opportunity to for users to pick out the tile that they want, and then the installers will install it. So it'll be a compatible use with Nebraska Furniture Mart. It won't be actually part of the Furniture Mart, but we saw a lot of synergy for the Furniture Mart and this Floor Decor to exist together. So anyway, a nice use. We're trying to use, if you've gone down Dodge Street corridor, there's currently semis that you can see along the Dodge Street corridor. We're going to move those farther to the south so they're not visible for the Dodge Street corridor. So we believe a higher and better use of the site.
Thank you, Mr. Coolidge. The public hearing is closed. Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. I support this as well. I just wanted to note the Planning Department and also the Planning Committee of the City Council. We were approached by Nebraska Furniture Mart many months ago, and I think due to some changing federal rules and federal guidelines, there was some concern about the floodplain there near the creek that is nearby this property. And we're able to bring the Furniture Mart in to meet with the planning department to discuss future development opportunities, which is very important given Nebraska Furniture Mart's presence in our community and as a major employer. So I'm pleased to see them be working together and pleased to see this working out. And I'm sure this isn't the only thing they have in mind, but as maybe the first step of making the highest and best use of that entire property. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Festerson. We have a motion and a second. No further lights. Roll call.
Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 7 is approved, 7-0. Item 8, an ordinance to rezone property located at 1026 North 33rd Street from R4 District to R5 District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 8 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Council. Michael Sands, 1700 Farnam Street, on behalf of the applicant, Gary Bernstein. Mr. Bernstein is also available via Zoom. This is a request for rezoning at 1026 North 33rd Street. Just to provide a little bit of context and background on it, because it is unique. My client bought the property as a vertical duplex recently within the last couple of years. It was marketed as such at the time of sale, but unbeknownst to him, the prior owner had illegally converted the duplex from a single-family home, which violated both the zoning and building codes. None of this was known by my client until he received the notices of violation from the city. Since then, he's worked with the city to at least mitigate those violations. Where there were originally 2 tenants, there's now 1, so that it's essentially operating as a single family, at least for the time being, until things get sorted out. The city has helped us along and been supportive of the zoning change to bring the property into compliance. And should that happen, Mr. Bernstein will invest to update the property, get it up to code, work with the city, etc. While the city has been supportive, there's certainly been quite a bit of pushback from the neighborhood. They've showed up to the public meetings, and I'm sure they will today as well, which is great. That's their right. They're trying to protect their neighborhood, and we certainly respect their opinion and what they're doing. But it's our understanding that their position is more generalized towards not allowing multifamily residences in the neighborhood. We realize they work very hard to make the neighborhood what it is now. It's a very nice neighborhood, and that's certainly what attracted my client to their neighborhood as well. But however, we would like to distinguish that from some other projects that might pop up with respect to multifamily, due to the fact that it will not change the character of the actual building that's there. It will remain as is, which it looks like a single-family residence, but it operates as a vertical duplex. And also, my client wasn't the bad actor in this situation. He was not the one who converted the duplex, and due to that fact, we don't believe it would set any sort of adverse precedent or encourage people to do something like this in the future. The only thing I would add is if my client isn't able to operate it as a duplex, it does, in essence, attach a lien to the property to convert it back to a single-family residence, whether that would be the obligation of my client or if he would market it to somebody else. So it really does kind of encourage waste, so to speak, if that is the case. But he will certainly comply with whatever the city decides. Happy to answer any questions. Like I said, my client's on the Zoom as well.
Thank you. Mr. Sands, did your client wish to say anything while he's registered, and we can turn off the Almo?
I think the plan was he'd be available for questions, but...
Thank you. Are there any other proponents in the chambers? Okay, we'll move to opponents. Are there any opponents in the chambers? And we do have people registered by Zoom as well, so welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Judy Alderman, 1041 North 34th Street, Bemis Park. In 1975, Bemis Park was granted an R4 designation for the majority of the neighborhood. And the boundaries of our neighborhood are 33rd Street to 40th Street and coming to Hamilton. The property in question is on the west side of 33rd Street, which is Bemis Park. Across the street is another neighborhood, Montclair, which is not zoned R4, I believe. This designation was sought to stop a trend that had begun in the 1960s when absentee landlords bought up older homes and converted them into 2 or more apartments. Many of these landlords did not adequately maintain their property or monitor the activities of their renters. In August of 1976, the Omaha World-Herald published an article about this designation. The neighbor, who was the spokesperson for the neighborhood at the time, was quoted as saying, "It's certainly a step toward preventing further deterioration of the neighborhood and hopefully will encourage rehabilitation." And that's exactly what happened. The trend shifted. People started buying these older homes, converting them back to single family and living in them. Today, there are very few homes that are still cut into apartments. There are other neighbors here today who will speak to this a little further. The property in question, 1026 North 33rd Street, was always a single-family home with multiple owners over its history. It was sold in 2017, as Mr. Bernstein's attorney indicated. It had been a single family prior to that. The new owner proceeded to chop it up into 2 apartments, a first floor and a second floor. He did this without pulling a single permit for any of the work done, and this conversion was a violation of the R4 designation. Those 2 apartments have not been consistently rented over the course of the time the investor owned it, and no one seemed to stay long. And I know this because that property is directly across the alley from my backyard, so I could keep track of what was going on over there. Mr. Bernstein purchased this house in February of 2019 as a single-family home, and I do have something to project here, if I could.
Yeah, if you put it on the Elmo, then
just
they'll
put
turn
it
it
here?
on, and yeah,
Okay.
it takes a second.
As
And
As
then,
Mr. Burns-
Judy, if you need to zoom in, that's on top of the device.
Oh,
Once it's illuminated, you can zoom in and out.
I see. I don't know which direction I'm going.
Well, it would help if she could see it.
Okay.
You can see it right there, Judy.
Yeah, okay. So there are 2 things I want to point out on this real estate transfer statement. As Mr. Bernstein's attorney indicated, his client purchased this believing it was a single-family home, and that's what's indicated on this real estate transfer. What I want to point out also, though, is number 12, where it says was real estate purchased for the same use, and that was checked yes. So that would seem to indicate that Mr. Bernstein planned to continue to operate it as a single-family home. We know that a number of inspections were done on this property in the fall of 2019, and those inspections revealed several violations, and among them were that a shared air return between the 2 apartments was not permitted, and it was noted that this was an illegal conversion and that it was to go back to single family. However, both units were rented at that time, I believe. Subsequently, a vacate order was issued and the owner was compelled to move the renter out of the second floor apartment. Mr. Bernstein filed a request with the Planning Department asking to have this property rezoned as R5 so that he wouldn't have to convert it back to single family. Neighbors strongly opposed this, both with letters and opposition at the meeting. Following that request, a waiver was filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals to reduce the requirement of lot width from 60 feet back to 44 feet, which was the width of the lot. So we're concerned, I guess, in part because we're not sure what other variances the owner will request in order to continue to maintain it as 2 apartments. Our main concern, however, is that we believe that this will set a precedent that we worked very hard to achieve R4 designation so that older homes would not be cut up into apartments. And we're concerned that that would not be good for our neighborhood, and it could start taking us back to where we were prior to the R4 designation being granted. So for all these reasons, I ask that the City Council please reject this request.
Thank you. Judy Alderman, and thank you for your years of volunteering to help improve your neighborhood through the association and Midtown Neighborhood Alliance.
All right, thank you.
Are there any other opponents?
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Minturn. My address is 3416 Hawthorne Avenue in Bemis Park, and I've lived there for 30 years as a resident property owner. I do have some handouts that I'm just
If you could get them to
here.
the clerk, she'll distribute them. Thank you.
So I will overlap a bit with what Judy said, but in a bit more, give you a bit more detail. So from an Omaha World Herald article dated August 5th, 1976, when Bemis Park neighborhood resident property owners petitioned the City Council for a change to R4 zoning, their goal was to protect family homes, prevent further deterioration of the neighborhood, and to encourage rehabilitation. They were called to action as they watched many of the large homes with many rooms be bought by landlords and turned into boarding houses or converted into apartments or up-down duplexes. Homes and properties were deteriorating into a state of disrepair. Crime increased and the neighborhood had a reputation for being unsafe. Resident property owners realized that in order to save the neighborhood from blight, a zoning change was needed. They knew that owner-occupied single-family homes stabilize the neighborhood and are necessary to accomplish change. Having skin in the game matters. The City of Omaha leaders knew this also and were very supportive. We got the zoning change, and to a great extent it worked. Encouraged by the city's support, residents started to promote the neighborhood for its historical interests, mature trees, winding boulevards, parks, and proximity to downtown, hospitals, and universities. Over the years, many single-family homes have been preserved. Others have been restored to their original single-family status. The work expanded to making improvements to the public spaces. In 1982, in recognition of these efforts and the benefits to the city, then Mayor Mike Boyle proclaimed a week in August as Bemis Park Pride Week. Some of these other neighborhood-led initiatives that improved our neighborhood and were supported by various city offices and departments include a designation of a landmark historic preservation district, purchase of city-owned abandoned lots in the neighborhood, formation of a citizens patrol, replacement of a fountain in the Walnut Hill Reservoir Park, installation of historic lighting and benches along the walkway in Bemis Park, improvements to the tennis court and construction of a toddler playground in Bemis Park, parade of historical homes, participation in the annual city-sponsored neighborhood cleanups, and most recently, we successfully petitioned the Public Works Department for speed bumps on 33rd and 38th Streets. The neighborhood has improved. With the support of the city, it is beautiful, it is safe, families with children are moving in. Houses that go on the market are sold in a matter of days. Property values have increased exponentially. We benefit, the city benefits. We are not surprised that Mr. Bernstein of Colorado would want to buy a house in the neighborhood. It's a good place to live for both homeowners and tenants. We are not against rental properties. There are many in our neighborhood. There are even some duplexes that were built as such before the zoning change. We are against the loss of single-family homes to illegal conversions. We are sorry for Mr. Bernstein's predicament, but feel that he should take it up with the unscrupulous person who sold the house to him. We also wonder why he was not alerted to check for proper zoning on such an obviously single-family home being marketed as a duplex, and maybe check on some permits. Our neighborhood should not have to take a step back to a dark time because of his lack of due diligence. There may be other similar scenarios out there waiting to surface. We don't want to set this zoning change as a precedent. We have done the work. We should be given the consideration in this matter. We ask the City Council to continue to give Bemis Park neighborhood the support it has given over the years by rejecting the zoning change request. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other opponents in the chambers? Mark, come on down.
Thank you. My name is Mark Peters, 3415 Lafayette Avenue in Bemis Park. My story is one of conversion. I moved into that neighborhood initially in 1980, and I was renting one of the apartments in a large older home that had been converted legally or otherwise, I don't know. At a certain point, I lost my youthful youngerness, wanting to go to the bars every night, and decided it's time to settle down. I'd gone back to school, got my degree in computer programming, and at that point, got a better job. Through other circumstances, the owner of the house that I live in currently, he was a resident landlord. He had the main floor for his apartment, and there was 2 others plus mine, total of 4 units. He was older. He was retired when I moved in, and so not that many years later, was becoming infirm. He moved out into a nursing home, and ultimately the house went on the market, and that's when I bought it. I thought at that point, I'd rather buy the house than move. It's easier. And partly that is because I enjoy the neighborhood. I like it a lot. I saw a lot of progress. As I said, moved in 1980. When I first went to look at the apartment, I came from the east and down one of the smaller streets, and I was a little concerned, but as soon as I got up to Lafayette, I thought, yeah, this is a nice neighborhood. I think I can live with this. Over the years, I have seen continual improvement in some of the things that Mary before me mentioned. It's just a wonderful place to live. In terms of my own personal experience with the conversion, before I committed to purchase, I was informed that I would have to convert it back to single family, which was my intention anyway, so that wasn't a problem. In the course of doing that, over the years, the initial thing, I took out 3 kitchens and took out a few other little things, rearranged the room configuration somewhat, but over the years, I've discovered 5 doors that have been covered over. Some of them were just completely covered over. Others were replaced by doors in a different location just to make it a 1 entrance room versus a 2 entrance, things like that. I've discovered a lot of things, which to me is kind of like a homeowner's archaeological project, and I enjoy that aspect of it. The other thing, prior to getting a job as a computer programmer, I did work construction. I did repair work, mostly in concrete, all around town, and I did notice certain parts of town, the construction was not up to where it should have been on brand new housing, to the point where my partner and I at the time were repairing a driveway that had not even been sold the first time, and it was falling apart. The thing about the houses in Bemis Park, they are the original housing. They're very sturdy built. My house passed its 100th birthday in 2013, and I expect it with proper care to be around another 100 years. So I would ask that you vote against this zoning change on behalf of myself and my neighbors. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Are there any other opponents in the chamber? I see a couple more. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name's John Riggleman. I live at 3505 Hamilton Street and have lived there for 30 years. A lot of those years, I have been a member of the Citizen Patrol, spoke of earlier, in that neighborhood. And I can tell you, from when I started and to today, it has greatly improved because of the R4 designation. Stolen vehicles aren't left in the neighborhood anymore. People that are wanting to do things that they shouldn't be doing go around Bemis Park because they know we care and we don't want to see it go back to the way it was. So, in just short, I would really appreciate it if you guys would not, and ladies, would not approve this, because I really don't want to see this neighborhood go back to the way it was when I moved there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next opponent, please. Go, come on up, sure. If we could let him go, and then we'll get to you next. Sorry about that.
Hello, I'm Bill Messenger. I live at 3404 Hawthorne Avenue, about a block from where we're talking about. I just love living in Bemis Park. These people have been friendly, welcoming, and considerate about everything that involves me and my family and the people that I'm around. I had no idea they were so well spoken. I knew they were good folks, but they've really laid it out today, and I'm not going to spend much time laying much more out. I would tell you that close to 20 years ago, I bought a house that had been a fourplex and converted it into a single-family home. I have a good buddy in the neighborhood that across the street from me bought a property and put at least a couple $100,000 into renovating it and making it a single-family home. And these are all very close to the property we're talking about. We're not anti-renters. Some of my best buddies in the neighborhood are renting property, and they're doing it in places where it's designated that they should and could. And anyway, it seems as though things have been in place. People have fought hard to get things in place. I think the things that are in place through regulations and the neighborhood association are valid and viable and important in maintaining our neighborhood. So I hope you keep all that under consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You wouldn't happen to have the oldest tree in the area, would you?
I wouldn't happen to what?
Whose yard has the oldest, one of the oldest trees in the state?
I'm a little hard here. I apologize.
Oh, someone answered my question, but thank you. Next opponent, please. For those who are wondering what that was, one of the oldest trees, if not the oldest tree in the state, is in this neighborhood. It's registered. Go ahead, Mr. Lindsay.
Yeah, I'm Dan Lindsay. I live at 1024 Mercer Boulevard, and I'm a member of the Bemis Park Neighborhood Association. I'm a third-generation resident of the house that I live in. My grandparents bought the house in 1936 and then subsequently sold it to my parents, and then I bought it from my parents in 1999. So I've had an opportunity to see this neighborhood do what it's done in the last few decades, and it's a remarkable success story for the planning department because in the early 80s they took steps to prevent houses to continue to be divided up into apartments, et cetera, and encouraged the neighborhood with some of its rules to convert these houses back, which a lot of people you've heard have relied on that and spent a lot of money and converted their houses. So I want to also reiterate that we have no objection to multifamily. That's been said a couple times now. But this is not what that is. The city must have been surprised to find out that there was someone representing this as a duplex, because it must have been news to them. So anyway, that's one thing I want to point out is, and it's been pointed out, is that the grievance that this owner, and I'm sympathetic to his situation, but whether or not he knew or didn't know, his grievance is with the person that sold him the property, and shouldn't ask the neighborhood to, in effect, subsidize that situation by letting this happen. If you do need to let this happen, which hopefully you will not, hopefully you can provide some guidelines for us in terms of how you made your decision to allow a zoning to go from R4 to R5, so we'll know how to react next time. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Are there any other opponents in the chamber on this item? Seeing none, we'll move to the, I'm sorry, I missed you.
Hey, good
Welcome,
afternoon,
Ben.
members of the council. Ben Swan, 3515 Hawthorne. I just want to thank all the other opponents today because they're the reason that my wife, Erin, and I moved into Bemis Park and decided to raise our family there. Through their hard work, they attracted 3 Creighton graduates in 2017 to the neighborhood who put several $100,000 into the house that we reside in. My wife and I purchased that house and allowed those young men to make a profit through that improvement on the house. When they bought the house, the tax base was around $100,000, and today it's in the ballpark of $350,000. So that, I pay a lot of taxes. I'm very happy to do it because I'm in a wonderful neighborhood. And these neighbors represent the work that was done today, and about 2/3 of them, along with me, are on a committee that's appointed by the neighborhood association that deals with current zoning, proposed future zoning that we would like to present to the city council at a future date, also code violations and just conditions of rental properties. In many ways, there's a couple members that are of my age group that are not here today also, that I feel like we represent the present and the future of the neighborhood, and it's our job to protect the work that these incredible neighbors have done for us. So, first of all, just let me hit on that tax base. You know, we are increasing the tax base and promoting the sustainability of that neighborhood through rehabilitation. And I am one of maybe 20 households whose assessment has doubled or tripled in the last 5 years because of what they have done, because of what my wonderful neighbors have done. In this committee, as we look to the future, we've had some tough discussions about single-family homes and about multifamily and about some of the future zoning with potential mass transit, neighborhood business district designations, transit-oriented development overlays. And we do realize that multifamily and an increase in density is a part of the City of Omaha master plan, and we are absolutely for that. We just, a lot of those types of developments come with adjacent capital improvements to public right-of-way and streetscape improvements and such. Sadly, those types of things do not come with conversions of a single-family home to a non-conforming duplex or otherwise non-conforming duplex. Those do not contribute to the tax base, they do not contribute to the character of the neighborhood, and they do not contribute to the state of the public infrastructure that the City of Omaha taxpayers must be responsible for. When we did buy our house, there was a historical tour put on by Restoration Exchange the same year that we bought our house. And a lot of these neighbors and some others made their houses available to the public to show the character of this neighborhood. One of the things that Restoration Exchange said was that Bemis Park is the oldest intact neighborhood. And what intact means is that there's not a lot of conversions today, and there's not a lot of houses torn down with sixplexes on a 50 or 60 foot wide lot. It's a continuous neighborhood from the late 1800s to early 1900s. And that character combined with, potential multifamily, especially on, maybe Cumming, maybe Hamilton, maybe 33rd, maybe 38th, that's done right, can improve that neighborhood and make it sustainable for the tax base for years to come. And in my opinion, a multifamily conversion of a single family house over the course of 100 years, the only ultimate final home for that property is an empty lot. That may subsequently be built into a new single family home, but in our neighborhood, it's not going to be multifamily unless it's planned and unless it's in a location that is in line with the City of Omaha master plan. And so I guess we are pro-growth. We are pro-sustainability for the tax base. We were economically responsible in this neighborhood. A lot of these neighbors have put in just time, talent, and treasure that I wouldn't be able to do, and they did it when there was little return in sight in Bemis Park. And so we are looking at ways, and we're working with some of the city councilmen here that we appreciate all of your engagement, to incorporate some of the other adjacent neighborhoods, to talk about how do we plan for that increase in density. And what I would actually challenge the city council to consider is, where do we really fit in the City of Omaha master plan? Because I think that this is a unintentional oversight on a number of levels of saying, how does multifamily fit into Bemis Park, into Montclair, into Walnut Hill? How do we preserve the character of those neighborhoods, but then also plan for being able to maintain the sewers, the lights, the roads, all of those things with a healthy, sustainable tax base? Thank you very much for your time, and appreciate you hearing me out.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Are there any other opponents in the chamber? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to Sophia Smith, registered by Zoom, 614 South 33rd.
I have missed this. My computer was glitching. I missed what just happened. Sorry.
It's your turn, Ms. Smith. Your name and address, and then your testimony, please.
We are still speaking of North 33rd Street, correct?
That is correct.
My name is Sophia Smith. I live at 614 South 33rd Street, and I'm speaking in opposition of this proposal on behalf of the residents of that neighborhood. You've heard a lot of really great testimony from the people who live there on why they would like you to deny this, and I would just like to echo their concerns, especially when it comes to the fact that residents in these neighborhoods do not want this denser housing that the City of Omaha is trying so hard to push on us. And we don't want it in a way that ruins the structural integrity of our neighborhoods, as this would if it were allowed. So I just implore you to listen to these people and their wants and decide accordingly. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. No further opponents. The public hearing is closed. Councilmember Gray, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. Right now, I guess I have to say that, well, first of all, this neighborhood association has the benefit of having 2 council members in its district that represent them, me on one side and the council president on the other. I guess my concern here is, for me especially, is, you have a situation where an individual prior to all of the people involved here did something that was inappropriate. The city didn't know about it. The city found out about it. And so the remedy here, at least as we look at it right now, the remedy here is to change this particular property to an R5 zoning. I'm not prepared to do that today. And I don't know that I'm prepared to do that at all. But I understand the concern of the individual who recently purchased the property. I was thinking about potentially a layover because, I wanted to see if there was a way that we could help him be whole or whatever the case may be. But to do a property like this and change it without people knowing about it and without seeking the proper permits from the city, I would have a concern about that. It would be different if we had not. We've done this on a couple of occasions where people have done things not knowing that they needed a permit, or in other instances, not trying to seek out a permit. And to continue to do that, it doesn't help neighborhoods. This is one of the neighborhoods with, in the summertime, they have one of the best chili feeds in town, I think. I wouldn't be prepared to do that. I wouldn't be prepared to be supportive of this today. I would think about the possibility, and I would like the attorney to come forward if you would, the potential for a layover so that we can have maybe a discussion with the purchaser to determine, just kind of what we do at this point, because to lay this on the council at this point, to me, is kind of unfair, but it is what it is. But I'm not prepared to, if I had to vote on it today, the vote would be no. Sure. And so, I do want to give somebody who purchases the property an opportunity, not necessarily to state his case per se, but to say, let's talk about some options that he may want to consider. But at this point in time, I can't be supportive of that because these neighbors have worked hard for that R4 zoning, and to reward someone else now for previous bad behavior would be a challenge for me, and it would be a reach that I can't make, at least at this point. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Gray. Mr. Sands, did you want to answer the question? Or?
Sure. Michael Sands, 1700 Farnam Street, on behalf of the applicant. We're certainly amenable to a layover if that's what the council wishes to further the conversation.
If you don't mind, again, I'd like to, I want to hear what at least one of the neighbors have to think about this, who's in the chamber as well. This is not about trying to make this an R5. This is about trying to help an individual who wasn't aware of what was going on, help him in any kind of way we can, but I can't at this point be supportive of an R5 zoning for this property. But I would like the opportunity, if the neighbors would be so willing, to give us an opportunity to lay it over for at least a couple of weeks, to talk with the purchaser, to see if there's a way that we can, maybe allay some of the financial concerns that he's laid out and so forth, not knowing what the situation was. But, we hear all the time, not knowing is not an excuse. So I think what we need to do now is I would like to have a conversation, or at least talk to them about what the possibilities are on their end. But right now, I can't be supportive of an R5 zoning.
Thank
but
you,
I'd like to hear from
Gray.
I'd like to hear from one of the neighbors, and then I'm done, Mr. President. Thank you.
I don't know, Mr. Swan, did you want to take a stab at that? You're on the committee.
Thank you. Ben Swan, 3515 Hawthorne. We would be very happy to help Mr. Bernstein discuss some options that are really alternatives to a duplex. Between the members of the Neighborhood Association and our committee, we have some information on prevailing rents for single-family homes that are pretty attractive and probably not that different than a unimproved converted duplex. We also have some comps of houses in Bemis Park and Montclair that are relatively unimproved single-family homes on good lot sizes that from the transfer statement, we see that he purchased the property for $125,000, and we've seen a lot of houses that are in various states, go for well in excess of $250,000. And fully improved houses in Bemis Park have been going for over $400,000 in the last year, in 2020. So those would be the things that if we could have a meeting that Mr. Bernstein or his representation would reach out to us, and we could have documentation of that meeting to present to the council, we'd be more than happy to entertain those types of discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Swan. Councilmember Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to clarify something that was stated earlier. I don't think it was meant to be a misrepresentation, but directly across the street to the east is still considered, in a legal context, Bemis Park, at least from a legal description. Montclair, I don't believe starts until another block to the east. So I just wanted to make sure that was clarified.
That's not correct.
Well, first of all, under the rules of the chamber, a crowd is not supposed to be just speaking from their chairs. They have to wait until a council member calls upon you to speak once the public hearing is closed. So we request that you respect that process. Councilmember Harding, did you have anything else you wish to say?
No, that's it. I mean, I'll be happy to meet with people afterwards if they can show me that that was incorrect, but that's kind of what my investigation showed.
Thank you. Yes, just for my comments on this matter, I would join in the sentiments of Councilmember Gray in sharing representation of the Bemis Park neighborhood. I'm on the south side. He has the north side. And it is an amazing neighborhood in terms of what makes for this neighborhood so strong, I think, is the prolonged or sustained commitment of the people, so many of whom who live there, to preserving the single-family residential structures that have been there while respecting the multifamily that existed beforehand. And in this particular case, coming here today, I did not see the real estate transfer statement that Judy Alderman shared. I should have known she would be coming with her information. Judy does a lot of research, and seeing that this was purchased under the real estate transfer statement with the single-family residence box checked, with box 12 for the future use being checked as single-family, to me, solidified in my mind that this is not the route that this property should go in terms of what my action is in terms of voting on this. So I too would like the opportunity for the neighborhood and Mr. Bernstein or his representatives to have time to meet to discuss alternatives in terms of an outcome that's different than the conversion to R5 for this particular property. And so, assuming that Council Member Gray, was that a motion to lay over for 2 weeks?
Motion to lay over, and I was going to check with the clerk. I know we don't meet next week. Is there a meeting the following week?
The next meeting will be on January 26th.
January 26th. I'll make a motion to lay over.
I would second that. Council Member Harding, is your light back on?
It is back on.
There you go. You're recognized.
So I'll meet the neighbors in the middle. Actually, it's interesting that half of the block on the east across the street is in Montclair, but half of the block is also legally described as Bemis Park. So we're both right.
And if you noticed, Councilmember Gray and I said we share the district because we're still trying to figure out the boundaries too. The street grid of Omaha is not necessarily in Bemis Park. So we have a motion, a second to lay over till January 26th. Roll call, please.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Brennan. Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Mr. Sands, if you'd see Mr. Swan, I'm sure he can connect you with the neighborhood contact information for your, probably have to be a video conference meeting of some sort due to COVID.
Item 9, an ordinance to rezone property located at 4240 South 50th Street from CC District to GC District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 9 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Wayne Wagner with Stan Houston Equipment, 4240 South 50th Street in Omaha. On behalf of the owner, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Harding.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Palermo.
Yes.
Brennan. Festerson.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 10, a resolution to approve the NAAF Habitat 7 Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan, generally bound by Sailor Street on the north, Pratt Street on the south, 24th Street on the east, and 27th Street on the west, in an amount up to $440,000.
The public hearing on item 10 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yes, good afternoon. Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning. The developer here is Habitat for Humanity of Omaha. let me,
He'll
Yeah.
turn it on for you. There you go.
and I'm sure you're all familiar with Habitat. Been very active with infill development in North Omaha, doing affordable housing units. The area in this instance is the Neighborhood Action and Fact. It's located between the North Freeway and North 24th Street, between Pratt and Saylor. Habitat will be doing 20 new homes. They're newly constructed, 1.5-story, 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes. They've done projects like this before, done a nice job doing infill development in North Omaha. See the total project cost, about $4.3 million. They're asking for $440,000 in TIF support. Meets the requirements of our TIF program. It's a good way to help stabilize and enhance the neighborhood, increase property values and home ownership. We ask for your approval.
Thank you, Mr. Seaton. Are there any other proponents on item 10? Are there any opponents?
Larry Storer, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I am opposed to any tax increment financing for this reason. We mentioned the word common sense, and in government, when you're using tax benefits from some people given to other people, it's not necessarily fair. Now, this morning, I raised this question at the upper chamber. I guess you might refer to the commissioners as upper chamber, that when you don't have the money for COVID expenses to be given out,
Mr. Storer,
you shouldn't.
You're off topic. You gotta
Excuse
get
me,
back
I'd like to finish. This does relate to this item.
Now you're out of order. You're to come back
This
in
does
order.
relate to this item, sir?
No, it doesn't.
I protest, and I will be going to the state about it. Thank you.
You're
I'm
welcome.
talking about tax increment financing, and you're interrupting a citizen.
You're
You should
free to
be removed.
continue if it's on this item. The choice is yours, sir. Next opponent. The public hearing is closed. Councilmember Gray, you're recognized.
Mr. President, just very briefly, this is an area that is in significant need of infill housing and repair. It's laudable that Habitat for Humanity would be willing to do this, and they've mapped it out fairly well. In addition to that, TIF is one of the major tools that we use and one of the few tools that we have to help developers develop properties that otherwise would not be developed. This is an area that is in bad need in a number of instances in terms of repair and to eliminate some of the blight that currently exists in that area. This is a really good opportunity. TIF is very appropriate. We talked about this a number of years ago when we made it okay for projects like this to ask for TIF so that we can do some major efforts at affordable housing, which is something that we critically need in this city. So I encourage my council members to be supportive of this project. It will really help change the characteristics of this neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We have a motion? No further lights. Roll call.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Brennan. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 11, a resolution to approve the Dewey Park Apartments Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan located at 3312 and 3306 Jones Street and 618 South 33rd Street in an amount up to $1,400,000.
The public hearing on item 11 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Good afternoon, Bridget Hadley with the City Planning Department. Before you is an infill redevelopment project within the Leavenworth Neighborhood Association proposed by the Green Slate Development Company. It is also, and as I have on the screen, it is highlighted, shaded in this light blue area. 33rd Street is here, Jones Street is here, Turner Boulevard is here. So it abuts, rather, the Omaha Parks Boulevard system, and then Dewey Park is over here. So just to kind of give you bearings. It is also a project that supports the goals within the Destination Midtown plan and the master plan through infill development, infill housing development, as well as supporting density. It is a site comprised of two-story residential buildings, and it's a little bit hard to see, but here's one and here's the other. There was a third building right here, but it was demolished in the 70s. The buildings had about 3 units in them each. It is mostly vacant. The buildings were not determined to be eligible for historic designation. The project is located, as I mentioned, on the southeast side. So the Park Boulevard system is there, so it's located on the southeast side, and it is a contributing resource to the National Register of Historic Places. And the applicant has been told, and they are going to be working with the city to make sure that they respect that. The redevelopment project plan proposes converting the site into a much denser site via the demolition of the structures and the new construction of a one-story, I will get to that, one building that's a 4-story residential building containing 55 market rate units, a mix of studios, 1 and 2 bedrooms. The rents are projected to range from $895 to $1,195 per month. There will also be a 1-story building for amenities on the site. Here is just some elevation. So this is the north elevation, west elevation, and then this here is the south and east. So just preliminary elevations for the building. So the site plan, just to see how it lays on the site a little better. So here's the 4-story building, and then there will be the 1-story building here for amenities. There's a courtyard area that's planned for the residents of the apartments. There's also going to be parking that is a part of this project, on-street parking. So here's 33rd Street. On the west side, the project is proposing to add these on-street parking spots. And then on Jones Street on the north side, and then there are a few on the south side. So those are some of the public improvements that this project will incorporate, as well as new sidewalks, landscaping, curb improvements, and then improvements. The project did indicate that they would have some improvements to the park to the north. This particular project will be the first project to adopt Tod Zoning Overlay District, which stands for Transit-Oriented Development Overlay District. And this allows for a project to reduce the number of parking provided by the project due to transit options in the area. So one thing we do know is that the requirement of parking for a project significantly escalates the cost of a project, which can make it less affordable for individuals to live there. So by not having to provide on-site parking, it can help this project provide more affordable units. The TIF request is $1.4 million for a project investment of approximately $8.6 million. And with that, I would ask for your approval and turn the podium over to the attorney representing the applicant for any additional details.
Thank you, Ms. Hadley. Mr. Beller?
Thank you, Mr. President. Brent Beller, 1140, on behalf of the applicant, 33 Jones, LLC. With me today is Clay Heiderman with Green Slate and Eric Westman, with Alley Pointer, the architect for the project. Bridget, as always, does a fantastic job describing these projects, but you know, it's important for us, especially after hearing the Bemis neighborhood and these urban neighborhoods. As we do infill, I think these discussions are really healthy, and that's why I want to take a little bit more time than I would traditionally to kind of walk through a little bit of what the conversations we've had, the issues we've had, and how we're kind of dealing with them. We had a neighborhood meeting on November 19th, but prior to that, the Green Slate team had met with the Leavenworth Neighborhood Association board members back in October, and then we had a Zoom meeting with the Neighborhood Association, we are appreciative of them allowing us to use their meeting time to present our project. That was opened up to the general public. During that meeting, there were a lot of questions that were expressed to us vocally, all on point as far as what we would traditionally expect for these infill projects. And so I want to highlight some of that conversation because I think that really helps us all understand what this project is, how a lot of us that are supportive of this project, and as Bridget mentioned, the Tod zoning, we want to get this right because this is going to be an important tool for our city and our master plan and in kind of circling the full circle of long-range city planning. So I'll start just with this site in particular. As Bridget mentioned, the buildings on this site were built in the 1930s. There's 2 existing, there's 6 units. They're renting for $1,200 a month currently. Our plan, once we acquire the building, we're going to tear these buildings down. And that is sensitive, right? They're old buildings, and a lot of folks, myself included, and Green Slate are always sensitive to tearing down old buildings. There was a historic study done on this piece of property. It is not located in a certified historic district. It's not that neither of the buildings are actually certified historic, and that's via the city's plan that they get in conjunction with the Nebraska State Historic Society. So we look at that. The other thing is and people get sensitive when we say this, but sometimes old buildings just aren't worth saving. Sometimes they've lived their useful life, and sometimes things just run their course. I know that. I live in an old house. It's 100 years old. We're routinely fixing it. Sometimes things just live their useful life. So one of the big things that we talked about with the Neighborhood Association was just why we're not saving this. The other thing that goes into this is saving historic buildings. It's expensive. It's really expensive, and no one knows that probably more than a Green Slate, where they've done 26 developments here in the last 10 years, 19 of which are historic reuse and 7 are new construction. So if there's a developer in our city that knows historic and preservation of that, it's them. So they've gone through that analysis. They understand that, and it wasn't worth saving. The other objective is just this particular site and what we're doing. And so as Bridget alluded to, we got a lot of questions as to our layout and how it fits with the boulevard system and the enhancement. And so everything Bridget said is accurate. We have our amenity buildings. We have these outdoor facades that allow our residents to enter onto the park. And so you're seeing a concept that is a little bit newer as far as multifamily, where we're having people and moving of people in and about our project. The other aspect, and sorry, I'm going to grab a couple exhibits here, were just generally what does this look like? A lot of folks had questions, why we chose aesthetically the architectural renderings. And so Allie Pointer, I think, did a fantastic job when they thought about how they're going to design this project. And so what they wanted to do is there's nothing too modern about this. This is a building going to be built in 2022. But what they tried to do is they tried to bring in that historic Tudor style that is very prevalent down in this area of Omaha. If you go look at the Blackstone district, a lot of those old apartment buildings that were built in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, they all use that Tudor style. So this is actually a rendering as you look east from Turner Boulevard. Obviously, there's someone on the trail, and this is the building. We think it looks very nice. We're understanding of not everyone likes what we like, and not everyone likes our paint colors and our design, and we get that. Everyone has their own opinion. But I think what we tried to get across was we were being mindful of the existing style, the historical nature of this neighborhood, and trying to blend something in that would fit had it been built in 2022, knowing that a lot of these buildings are older. And here's another rendering. This is actually as you look west. So down here on the bottom, this is actually 33rd Street. And as you go west, this would be Jones Street. And so our residents will enter into both here, and this is our amenity areas. Again, as you look at the facade of the building, and obviously everything that we do is approved by the Urban Design Review Committee here at the city. And so we tried to get that sort of, I'm going to butcher this, Eric, but that old kind of wood paneling that you would see in Europe, that sort of thing, that Tudor, and really enhance those sorts of features to kind of help it blend in. So that was another big talking point when we met with the neighbors. Finally, and the thing that I myself get really jazzed about is just TOD. And TOD is obviously not before you all today, but it's part of this whole package. And I want to make sure that we're all clear on what TOD is. As Bridget stated before, this is the first project here in the city of Omaha that's transit-oriented development. What does that mean? What it means is the goal of that program, which is obviously vetted by folks like myself on the stakeholders committee, residents, planners, developers, approved by our planning department, our planning board, and you all back in October. The goal of that is change our model of developments. And when I say change, I'm saying rethink how we move people and get people activated, pedestrians, homeowners, that sort of thing. And honestly, stop our reliance on the car. And so a project like this, situated in this area of Omaha, is, in my opinion, the perfect project to start off TOD zoning. When you think about TOD zoning, and when I was talking about doing a full circle as far as here in the city, we have implemented and we have invested tens of millions of dollars in public infrastructure in the last 2 years. If you look at Orbit, all of our bike lanes, all of our mass transportation, that's all great and wonderful, but unless you have housing developments like this that implement and sort of push people to go use those public transportations, it's all for naught. And I say that because in talking with the Green Slate guys, they know immediately we're ostracizing some people from ever wanting to live here because they want a car. They don't believe in that. But we believe in it, and Green Slate believes in it, and we think that there are people out there that enjoy riding their bike up to Blackstone or walking or going to Midtown Crossing right up the street, and we're sort of putting our money where our mouth is. If you like bikes, and I'm a bike nerd, and we are weird, and we're really into it if you're into it, this is a place for you. You have a bike lane on Turner Boulevard, you have a bike lane on 33rd Street, you have a bike lane on Leavenworth Street. That was all purposeful from a planning perspective. Then when you go and you have a development like this that implements all of that and puts their money where their mouth is, and you utilize the TOD zoning, yes, we don't have 55 parking spaces that are designated for this, but we're pushing towards using mass public transportation. So it's important to note that because we are sensitive to the neighbors that live here and whether or not there's going to be parking issues. And we heard that, we don't want people from Dewey Park coming over and parking in our parking spaces and vice versa. Now, I've also talked with Parks Department. I understand they built more parking spaces at Dewey Park. They have a plan to implement, I think it's 8 to 10 more parking spaces over at Dewey Park to handle the dog park. But we're trying to change our reliance on parking vehicles with multifamily. The other important thing I'll point out is back to our plan. Jones Street is going to become one way. And sorry, I'm below. So we have connected with, to the south of us is an OPBD plant. So there's never going to be anything built over there. To the north of us, there's never going to be anything built because, as Bridget said, this is all park ground. So we've actually given up a little bit of our property on the east and a little bit of our property on the south. And we've kind of shifted everything over there, which eventually we're going to be in front of you for some waivers for our PUR just because of those setback violations. But in any event, we're installing all that parking spaces. We're installing all the parking on Jones Street and some additional parking on the south of Jones Street. And then this is also going to be one way. So we think that flow of traffic will sort of heed some of the concerns that folks will have with the amount of traffic on 33rd Street. Thirdly, we heard a lot about affordability. And this is a subject that we could spend hours talking about here. And I'm very cognizant of that. And all developers of multifamily are very cognizant of that because we truly don't have a definition of what is affordable. We have market rate and we have low-income housing, and low-income housing is a very defined term, and that's obviously guided by the IRS Section 42. That is a competitive program. They have to apply to the federal government, and it's a tough project, but it's there because low-income housing is difficult to develop. We think this is affordable. We think this is affordable because we look at market rates, and our market rates, and so if you look at HUD's comprehensive plan, here in the city of Omaha, $950 a month is the median, the average amount of rent that apartment payers are paying. And that's not our numbers, that's HUD. If you go look at other reports issued by larger real estate companies, they'll say $970 is the average amount. Our rates here will be anywhere between $850, as Bridget said, I think she was a little high, $850 to under $1,200. And reminder, they're currently being charged $1,200. Again, there are cheaper places to live versus here, but we think we're taking a risk here that our product in this location is a good investment. We got a lot of comments that we're ostracizing folks from living down here. And the exact opposite is actually true if you analyze this issue. There are lots of studies out there that indicate the more units that you bring online, by definition, the more the market drops, right? more of a product, cheaper it can be. We want to bring in the working class to a place like this. We want those people that want to live, work, play, walk around. So I understand sentiment that some people can't afford whatever our rent is, but that's true of any projects here in the city of Omaha. And then the last piece that we talked about, a lot of good questions about TIF, and as the gentleman right before me, before he was recused, some folks just don't understand TIF. The base value of property taxes we will always pay. We are not taking any tax dollars from anybody else, and this is true of any TIF project, from anybody else. Nobody that lives around here is paying any of their property taxes towards this project. The only person that's paying property taxes is the developer. A lot of questions about blight and substandard. We've been over that a million times. I know you all have heard it. But it's important to note that that is a legal definition that the state legislature implemented when they passed the statute. It's not our city. It's not us. We don't consider it blighted substandard. That's just a term that's used. And so we had a healthy discussion about that all as well. Sorry for being long-winded. I wanted to make sure we get this. I don't know if there's many people here to speak in opposition, but we wanted to make sure that everything was kind of out in the open, and we want to make sure, as I mentioned, that we get this right, because I agree these historic neighborhoods are important, and there's a way to continue their health and vibrancy, but there's also a way to redevelop them into better and higher uses, and we think that this is this. So with that, I'll stop. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any proponents who wish to be heard on this item? Those in favor?
Hello, Spencer Lombardo, 1303 South 72nd Street. I am a principal in an entity called Pure Properties LLC. In Pure Properties LLC, we own 3318, 3314, 3310, and 3308 Jackson, as well as 563 South 34th Street. This would represent all the parcels adjacent to the north of this project. So we also own 4 other single-family homes and a triplex property in the neighborhood. So we're pretty well vested into the neighborhood, and we also manage about 250 units of homes, duplexes, triplexes, and multifamily in the Midtown, just in the Midtown area, within about a mile of here. So I understand the market very well, understand the neighborhood very well. As a property owner in the neighborhood that would be most directly affected by this project, we're in full support of the project. I just want to reiterate, as a neighbor and as some the things that people often look at when looking at the TIF and the rezoning is the parking. Our properties are mostly self-parked in the neighborhood. The neighborhood has a lot of alleys with driveways off of them. And most of our properties have driveways and alleys, and street parking is not an issue in the neighborhood. And I noticed on their site plan that they're actually adding the diagonal parking, which is fantastic, and we think it's a great plan. As far as traffic, we don't have any concerns about traffic. There's not a lot of traffic in the neighborhood. This project's being built right on Turner, which we don't think that'll affect our tenants at all. We think it'll be a great project. And then, of course, the height restrictions. Obviously, you have Mutual of Omaha to the north, and this won't be a very tall project, but taller than maybe the average. But we don't think it'll at all alter the character of the neighborhood. If anything, it'll add to what Mutual wanted to bring to this neighborhood when they first did their project. And frankly, we're all in on it too. We want to eventually use some of the same TOD zoning and perhaps redevelop some of our property someday. And that's part of the reason we're in full support of this project. And finally, and I think possibly most importantly, and I'll tell you, I can really speak to this, perhaps even more than their attorney can, the affordability. Like I said, we manage 250 units in Midtown, and it's an absolute price point thing. People talk about price per square foot a lot. We get a lot of tenants that are workforce, they're servers at bars and restaurants, and they're the workforce, they're the heart and the soul of Midtown and our urban district, our urban core, and they're looking in the 8s and the 9s, It doesn't matter what it is per square foot. If they can get something in that $800 price range, that's very affordable. And if you look at what if you kind of do the calculation, because 30% of your income can go towards rent, you start to see that that's a very affordable price point for their 1 and their 2 bedrooms. It's more affordable than my properties are, frankly, right now in that neighborhood. So I think it really checks a lot of boxes. It fulfills that affordability, which we're really, really lacking in Midtown, I'll tell you that. And it fulfills the goal of densifying our urban core, which, as I think most of us probably agree, that's healthy for Omaha long term. It adds a lot of tax base eventually. Once the TIF goes out, it adds that huge tax base without the city having to spend a whole lot more money. And we all like that as citizens of the city. So we're in full support of the project for those reasons, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Seeing none, are there any opponents in the chamber? Welcome, Dub.
Hi.
Now, it's going to get interesting.
You get to see me. My name is William Dub Kramer. I live at 3263 Jackson Street, Unit A. My property is the Jackson Street Condo Association, directly to the east of this proposed change. My main complaint, it's a beautiful project, and I don't have a problem with it. I appreciate very much the understanding as far as the parking, because that is our major complaint that we have. 10 years ago, we rebuilt our garage so that the 4 people would have off-street parking for that. It's a condominium unit, 2 units, and a total of 8 owners. We have 10 people currently living at the project. It is very difficult to find parking. I've lived there since 2003. I'm blessed now because I'm in the garage. I pay $100 a month for the privilege to park in that garage. 2 of the people struggle very much to find parking at the end of the night. 33rd Street is heavy traffic. It is hard to find parking in that area. I was doing the math, and I was trying to figure out how, and again, thank you, how 55 units with the relation, only 40, I believe, 38 spots. So that left a difference of 17 spots. At the current time, just regular parking is difficult to find. And then you compound that with Alderman's. When the bar is open late at night, people will park all the way down the street. You compound it with the summertime when Dewey Park is there, and I understand that he did say they were going to add extra parking at Dewey. I have people that park in front of our building all the time to go over to the park. I don't chagrin them for that. I'm glad the park is there. It's why I bought there. I'm a tennis player, and I found the place. It's fantastic that way. But with snow removal, it's definitely been an issue to find parking right now. There is no parking in front of our building, as there is a couple of huge lots of snow there. Additionally, along the side, as I was saying, 33rd Street, traffic is heavy. The parking has not been an issue as much in the last month because there are 3 vacant properties right now no one is living into on the on the east side of 33rd Street ever since Mr. Ellis passed away about 5 years ago. No, that property's come and gone with people renting in and gone. Usually 3 or 4 people. So that is our major concern. I do have the support of the other 7 unit owners. Of course, some are teachers, some are older. They were concerned to be here. Sorry we couldn't be here en masse. And again, it's a beautiful project, and I like the whole idea of the walking, the TOD. That's wonderful. But to further state on that, my issue with bus services are the hours. I'm a person who works till 10 o'clock, so I have to drive home because when I get done, the bus service is already ended by that time. It's cut off and it's no longer running on that route on certain days. There are certain days it runs later on weekends and weekdays. So that, I appreciate the idea of walking. I love to walk to the park. I also walk up to Midtown all the time into that area. But we are a car-based city. We are a spread out city. We did not spread up. Cars are necessary to get around here. I would argue 90% of us need cars to get around here. So the one thing I do love about the project, I noticed that the bike area that they were putting in there, because that is along a bike path, and I appreciate that. I encourage it. It's good. It's health, wellness. My doctor would like me to walk more, and I'm only 20 minutes from work, so I can walk home when I've missed the bus. I do own a car, so I appreciate that too. I don't think I have anything else, but they just kind of threw me off track because I was going here. I just want to make sure the snow. It is and the intersection, I guess, is the only other thing. I would say it is a very busy intersection. People do fly around Turner Boulevard and come up 33rd Street very quickly. So those slanted parking spots there, I don't know if it's going to change the size of the street. I can't really tell. I'm not an architect to tell on those designs. But I don't think that there is ample enough parking in this project. We seem to be already in our neighborhood short about 10, 15 spaces. We would now compound this and make it short those additional spaces. I appreciate your time. I don't have anything else unless you have any questions for me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dub. Are there any other opponents in the chamber who wish to speak on this item? If not, we have one registered by Zoom, Sophia Smith, 614 South 33rd. Welcome back, Ms. Smith.
Hello again. As I stated before, for just up the road, I am completely opposed to this development for many reasons. Though I will just start off by pointing out that these developers like to constantly misrepresent the price range that these buildings are currently at in order to make it seem like their units will be affordable. I have never paid $1,200 to live in my 2-bedroom home that I have within one of the triplexes here, and I currently only pay $900. So this idea that they keep forcing onto you to believe that their units will be affordable, to put that into perspective, they're asking basically $900 for studios. Again, I'm paying $900 for a 2-bedroom home in a triplex, and so that is just a misrepresentation of their numbers. But moving on from there, we've submitted to, I know, Durham and the planning board and the city council multiple times, petitions that we have circulated throughout the neighborhood that put in much greater detail than I'll even be able to address completely today. All of the reasons why people in this neighborhood fully oppose this project. One of them is parking. And most of the others is that the people here have a great distrust of Green Slate specifically, and for good reason. Green Slate likes to push this idea that they're one of the reasons why Midtown is a booming place to live, but that's just not true. It's us, the actual lower income working class people who have lived here and built these communities that make it a place that people want to live. And Green Slate time and time again has proven that they do not have our best interests in mind by continuously bulldozing and eliminating housing that is affordable to us. So it's not just affordable housing in general, that's like a concept, but it's just housing that's affordable to us. $900 studios, that's not affordable. And Green Slate, that's what they're doing, is they're forcing us out of our homes and then pricing us out of our community that we built. So we have a great distrust towards them specifically, and that is one of the reasons why we oppose this project. I currently live here. I'm being forced out of my home in winter during a pandemic. I'm supposed to be out before the end of the week, and that's Green Slate's doing. They may not technically own this building right now, but they are pushing to demolish even while I'm still living here. That's the kind of people that they are. They have no regard for people like me who can't ever afford now to come back and live in this neighborhood. That's a huge loss, but that's not just me. It keeps happening over and over again because of them. Some of the other issues that we have, going back to the issue that the neighborhood Bemis Park was facing on North 33rd Street, it's not that we're against multifamily housing at all. I mean, I live in multifamily units right now, but these units, these 2 triplexes with parking, that works for this neighborhood. It's not that we're against multifamily dwellings. We are against this idea that we need such dense housing when really that just causes more problems for everyone. We just don't need that. And we're tired of them pushing that as like it's the best thing for the city, it's the best thing for this community. I am begging you to read the comments that we've submitted through our petitions, because we are telling you as actual community members and people of this neighborhood that that is not best for us. And we do not want that. And we're asking you to deny this project. We don't want the project at all. We specifically also do not want Green Slate heading it. I have a lot of other things that I would like to say, but I'm clearly personally affected by this, so I have a lot of feelings. I guess in closing, I am asking you to deny this because I believe, and we as a community believe, that this city needs to stop putting the wants of developers before the needs of the people of the community. That is what I'm asking you to do. That's all I have right now. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. We have no further people registered. The public hearing is closed. Excuse me, Mr. Bell, you're entitled to a minute of rebuttal if you wish any.
Thank you, Mr. President. Brent Beller, 1140 on behalf of the applicant. As I mentioned, we get it. We understand parking's at a premium here. But you know, if we look long range, and to Councilman Brinker Harding's sentiments earlier on, we always need to have the forward looking. And if we're going to try and change our city and change and implement these ideas, we have to start somewhere. And the investment started with public transportation, and now we're putting investment and putting over policies and zoning designations that allow us to try and stop relying on the car as much. We will always be mindful of our neighbors, and I vehemently disagree with what Ms. Smith just said about Green Slate. I don't think there's a developer here in Omaha that's been more open to change. I lived on Farnam Street before Blackstone was there. I know what it was like before they came in and had ideas and implemented those ideas and invested well over $175 million in that particular stretch of Omaha. There's not many developers that are homegrown that have done that and given back to their city more than Green Slate. So I respect her opinion, but as someone who does this every day, day in, day out, there's not many people that are as top notch and do it the right way more than Green Slate. So I understand the parking. This is what TOD allows. It's half of what the designation would be, so that's why we have the 38 parking spaces. We will always be mindful of removing snow from the right-of-ways and the public sidewalks that encroach or surround our project. But hopefully that answers the question. And again, here for any other questions.
Thank you. And the public hearing is closed. If you could stay close by. I don't see any lights, so I'll begin by asking you some questions, Mr. Beller. I represent this area, and in fact, was the head of my neighborhood association just to the south and west of this area at the time of the Destination Midtown planning effort that, although Mutual of Omaha was a large sponsor of, the neighborhood associations for Midtown in particular and Leavenworth neighborhood specifically was the founding member of that effort and very engaged in the planning effort that culminated with this master plan not an overlay, but a submission to the planning department that basically led to these developments of the urban planning code that's implemented and improved, the design standards. It's led to improvements in the master plan and the environmental element and the transportation element and the long terms of the city in terms of improving density. And and I recall the people who educated me when I was first then elected about the process not only were from the city planning department that were explaining the technical side of the things, but the Leavenworth Neighborhood Association leadership, their board members who took me on the walking tour of the neighborhood and made sure I understood why it was, and they were showing me in this area, in the Park Avenue neighborhood and in the Blackstone neighborhood, that had high crime, that had numerous code enforcement issues, that had housing maintenance code issues, both residential and commercial, and why it was so important to them that this redevelopment occur. But that doesn't mean that there aren't or haven't been as a unintended consequence of this fabulous transformation of Blackstone and the surrounding Midtown crossing areas and Park Avenue, and I could go on, of having people who are living there, like Ms. Smith, who feel uniquely, I have to thank Dub. They say don't ever bite the hand that feeds you. Literally, Dub is if you want to know a stalwart of Midtown, Dub will actually feed you at La Casa. So I've known Dub for a long time, and he's a great person and passionate about Midtown and his neighborhood. But so please explain to me here, in terms of this particular project, in answer to the rental roll information. Ms. Smith's paying $900, and somehow there was this thought that her current landlord's charging her $1,200. And I know that's not your client, but where did you guys get that information?
That came directly from the current owner. And if I'm being completely honest, we were told between $1,200 and $1,250. I don't know what she pays. We didn't do a rent roll like a traditional when we acquire apartments. We get the rent roll. We're not doing that, obviously, because the buildings are being demolished. I do know that she was given notice in November, I understand. I believe that she was offered free rent for December and January. Obviously, the security deposits being given back. But it's like I said, when you have someone that's paying, whether it's $900 or $1,200 for an existing place, we get that, and we also get that this may not be
prohibited by code from reserving those spots for tenants or his tenants to pay here and still make the money, the finances work. And to go through a LIHTC, low-income tax credit process, you can't really do it for 2 units in this one unit, one building. So it was taken off the table for legal reasons and for financial reasons. Is that correct?
That is correct. With one
state community redevelopment law could impose a requirement on the developer that they dedicate certain units for either low income or reduced affordable rates that we determine. And it was his opinion that under the state law did not allow that. Do you share in that, or has your opinion changed in any way? They'll turn it on for you.
Matt Kuzi, acting city attorney. The position of the law department has not changed on that topic with Mr. Kretz's departure, so the opinion of the law department remains the same.
Okay, so to the people who contacted me with that concern, and there were a few that did, the city council's hands are really tied in this respect unless and until the redevelopment law in the state is amended to allow that or somehow address it. I will say that the city council's planning committee, which Councilmember Harding, myself, and Mr. Festerson is the chair of, have been monthly discussing this topic with the planning department and the community redevelopment person, Mr. Lukash, as to ways we can address this issue, because people like Sophia Smith here are not unique. Mm-hmm. They feel the pain and it hurts when they have to relocate, and so we're listening, we hear what they're saying, and we're trying to work on it. And it's frustrating that the law is what it is in this regard, but that's the opinion of the law department, and so we can't compel your client to do that. Mr. Fanzalot, would you come on down? You can stay close, Mr. Beller.
Okay, Fanzalt, Plan Director.
TOD, master plan, long-term goals, affordability, densibility, mass transit, environmental elements. So these are things that some people here aren't familiar with what they are, and then say, well, ultimately, why is the city, and you as the planning director, just take a minute, what is it the city is trying to accomplish? We heard Mr. Beller say some things, but he represents the developer, and some people are skeptical as to whether he is, going to share what the city's objective reasons are for doing these things. So could you just take a minute to...
Sure. So I heard a lot of things, TOD, master plan. I'll try to hit on those, and if I don't, then just let me know, and I'll try to answer your question better. So there's no doubt that the master plan talks about densifying parts of our city, making use of that existing public infrastructure, be it sewers, streets, what have you, public transportation. So when we look at the master plan with infill development, we are trying to take advantage of that existing infrastructure. I've said here before, I've said all over this building before and outside this building that we only have a certain amount of ground left that we will be able to develop at urban densities. And once we reach that point, we will be stuck with what we have. So we are always looking at retrofitting parts of our city, not all parts, but some parts, along those mass transit corridor lines, where the zoning allows it, where the density will allow it, where the public infrastructure will allow it. The master plan talks about providing many different types of housing for many different types of people. Not everybody wants to live in a single family home, and not everybody wants to live in a high rise. So there's that in between. It's been referred to as missing middle here the last couple of years. We're all aware of that. So the master plan and staff, obviously, who's carrying out that master plan, looks at all of those things when we look at development proposals, when we look at policy, when we look at amendments to our master plan.
And correct me if I misspeak, but I've heard anecdotally and directly conversations with you in terms of the city's transit-oriented development. Even before the TOD was established, it was somewhat recognized nationally by other cities as to how we were redeveloping along the mass transit corridor in Midtown and Blackstone, and you would have representatives from other cities actually coming here and taking tours to see how this worked. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, we didn't come up with this code or this policy in the locked office. We did research regionally, nationally. We all go to conferences. We all talk to the people who don't live and work in Omaha. So yeah, we have a pretty good idea, obviously, since we have some code passed now that we worked for a couple of years on, and master plan amendments that deal with TOD and what kind of development we would like to see and what we expect to see.
And in experientially, as the tours were going on, I believe I heard, and Mr. Beller can confirm if you don't recall, but the experience of the developers who are building along mass transit routes, we have learned is that there's much less or reduced demand or need for parking, because large numbers of the people who are choosing to live in these mass corridor developments are wanting to live by taking alternative means to and from work and by walking, biking, and using mass transit, particularly so when you're close to the Med Center and Mutual of Omaha and mass employers. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's accurate for TOD, for the TOD that we have in place. We've mentioned Destination Midtown. I was around when Destination Midtown was put together, and yeah, that was largely driven by the large employers, two of them that you mentioned, the Med Center and Mutual, how to attract and retain talent to that part of the city, and to their organizations who don't want to commute 25 to 30 minutes to work.
So as the city looks at approaching build-out of its developable space, the cost of providing city services not remaining flat, but increasing over time, primarily driven by infrastructure because of the decay and replacement, as well as cost of providing public safety and things like that. As it's been explained to me, if we don't increase density in the urban core, we not only have less demand for these things like mass transit or alternative transit, we then have the decreasing ability through flat or increasingly smaller growth in property taxes as a means to sustain the city's obligation to provide those services going forward.
It's a balancing act for sure. So, we look at density throughout our jurisdiction. So, like I said before, not everybody wants to live in a high-rise. Some people want to live in single family, and it all plays together. Omaha's had a very good record of managed growth through the creation of new neighborhoods through SIDs, and then eventually the annexation of those. Those are all well thought out financially, infrastructure-wise. Those are all very well thought out. So it all plays together. So we'll have suburbia, as people call it, and we'll have the urban core, and they'll play together well. They have.
Thank you.
But
in terms of this particular project, though, the planning department recommended approval. Does it comply? Do you agree with Mr. Kuzi that this complies with the law, the master plan, the city's long-term goals, and that's why you recommended approval?
That is accurate, yes.
Was the TIF committee unanimous, or was there dissent?
I believe it was unanimous.
And what was the planning board outcome?
It was unanimous, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fanslow.
You're welcome.
So having addressed all of these things and taken a little more time than we normally do, first of all, I feel a special connection to the Leavenworth Neighborhood Association, because that was kind of the leadership that took me under the wing to really, what is Destination Midtown about? Why are we doing this, and what it has evolved into? Also because I feel and hear what the people who have been moved out of some of the places that they're living in, and Ms. Smith is an example, and we want to be very sensitive to and try to respond to and address their concerns, because this is a growing issue. We could spend hours talking about. It's not going to go away. But in terms of this particular project in this particular place at this particular time, it meets the requirements of law, it meets the requirements of the redevelopment law, and that is why I am supportive of it. And that concludes my remarks at this time. Councilmember Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Go ahead and talk.
Probably better that you can't hear me.
No, he's been, for some
no.
reason, there's been a delay in not only the audio visual, but with the mics too.
Okay. I'll be brief, because I know, I think you did a great job of kind of covering the reasons and the compliance and the of it being master plan compliant, that it's and I said this at pre-council today too, and I think Mr. Beller pointed out as well, is that this is the first TOD project that'll be in front of us, and although this is not the TOD we're discussing today, it's really the TIF redevelopment plan and not the TIF redevelopment agreement, but I think it's important to talk about some of these issues while we're talking about the redevelopment plan. I find it interesting too. It was that you don't often hear a developer or the developer's representative talk about how they are trying to kind of run away from some of the possible clientele that might be here. And by that I mean by saying, you know, we know we're not going to be appealing or a candidate for housing choice for some people by the mere fact that we are limiting the amount of parking that goes along with this project. I mean, normally we're sitting here, you know, making, if it's in, you know, suburban Omaha, we're talking about, you know, making sure that we have one per door or something along those lines. I also think it's important to point out, and unfortunately, Some of the people who question the use of TIF are not here right now to hear this, but maybe they're listening at home, is that public improvements, that's really kind of the first component of what TIF is used for. And again, as was pointed out by Council President Jerem, these additional parking stalls that are going in are at the expense of the developer. So those additional parking stalls, which are not unique or alone to the development, they are first come, first served. They are on the public right of way. But that's actually, those public improvements are part of what the TIF eligible funds will be used for. So I think that's kind of an important point to bring up at this point. So I've covered the risk, I've covered TOD, covered TIF, and also obviously that it's master plan compliant, which has been backed up by both the planning department and Mr. Fanslow's comments, but also what was the consideration at the planning board. So I know there's someone following me on the talking list, but at this point I'll make the motion to approve, but and yield the floor to probably Mr. Festerson.
Thank you, Councilmember Harding. Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. I thought the President did do a nice job of walking through the case and the analysis. The only thing I wanted to add and maybe have a broader point on is that issue of affordable housing. As the President did note, the Planning Committee is very attuned to this issue. We are working on this every month, and I think we all agree it's a very big issue in our city. There's no doubt about that. I think when the Council President talked about could a requirement be placed to require affordable housing, like on this project specifically, that answer is no when it gets to this point. But I do want to say that we as a committee have requested of the legal department an analysis based in law as to whether the TIF committee itself can consider a requirement of TIF products that do come through that process to require some percentage of affordable units within developments that receive public subsidy, and or can the city council do that at some point in the future? And we'll work on that analysis when we get it. We don't have it yet. The other part of that, or could it be incentivized if it can't be required? That might be another approach that we're looking into as well. So it's something we're going to keep working on, and we know is a huge issue in the city. In fact, a recent study presented to us would indicate there's about 80,000 units short in Omaha right now of what could be considered affordable housing, and that folks need to have opportunities to live throughout the city. And we talked about average rent here, average median rent in the context of this project, but we're talking about average median income, which is a very different number than $900 or $1,000 per month. And if you take the HUD definition, it's even 70, 80% of what the average median income number is, and can one afford 30% of that? So that's a very different number and different conversation than we're even talking about here today. But I do support this project, and I do support transit-oriented development. Worked hard to pass that master plan through the corridors of Dodge Street and in cooperation with my neighborhoods and with the Orbit project. And I think this does carry through those principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Festerson. Councilmember Harding, your light's on.
Thank you, Mr. President. And to pick up on that, if by the estimates, if they are accurate, but if I'll just use the 80,000 units being short on workforce housing or missing middle housing, to highlight the kind of the gymnastics we're going through on this committee, even if all 55 units were, if they were required to be low income or missing middle income housing, that represent 55 out of 80,000. I think that highlights or illustrates the challenge that we have as we're looking through this is how do we move toward supplying more of that housing product Not germane to really this argument here, or this case here, but Mr. Festerson brought it up. I thought it would be an interesting point to show the challenge that we have as we're moving forward to address that issue.
Thank you. We have a motion, a second. Roll call.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Brennan. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 11 is approved, 7-0. Item 12, a resolution to approve the Omaha Box Company Building Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Project Plan located at 2501 North 21st Street in an amount up to $2,750,380.
The public hearing on item 12 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yes, good afternoon. Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning. The Omaha Box Company Building TIF project plan located at 2501 North 1st Street, It's a rather large and sprawling industrial building, older building, presently vacant. Also includes a green space to the south and this block to the west. It's immediately south of the airport. This Freedom Park is just north of the river. This building will be occupied by Ceres Company along with Platt Logistics. Ceres is an engineering, design, fabrication, and assembly business. Platt Logistics is primarily warehousing. So the building will be used for office space, warehousing, and some assembly. It's like I said, a large building. It's about 190,000 square feet. It is a comprehensive rehab. They're looking at a little over $20.3 million invested in fixing up this building. The developer is Flat Rock Group, LLC. It's managed by Lori Brockman. I would note that there is about $488,000 in public improvements in this project. Councilman Harding mentioned that we do get public improvements out of our TIF projects. That's one of the benefits of TIF. And that'll include some street improvements and some drainage improvements that are badly needed in that area. They're requesting $2,715,380 in TIF support. And it's really a good project that'll provide additional jobs. Ceres Company is presently, managing a kind of a disjointed operation in a couple different locations. This gives them not only the ability to expand with more jobs, but greater efficiency and cost savings. Project complies with our master plan. It's been approved by the TIF committee, the planning board, and we ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents?
Thank you, Mr. President. Brent Beller, 1140 West Center Road. As Don said, this on the other side of the spectrum, here's a project, commercial in nature, another great example of why TIF is such a great incentive here in the state of Nebraska. This particular building was housed with Omaha Box Company for well over 100 years. They built a new processing facility out in Sarpy County. With that, Ceres Company, who's an offshoot of Nebraska Machinery Company, Ceres is their in-house fabrication. So they're going to be doing all manufacturing in-house fabrication in this particular building. So if you think of like a rail line and they need a certain crane that needs to be fabricated to go fix that rail line, they're going to do that in this building, which you can't see it here, but there's an old rail, old spur back there, which really made this advantageous for this. But as Don said, TIF is a great incentive, and we take it very seriously for projects like this as well. $500,000 for just public right-of-ways that we're improving, Avenue J, H, and 21st Street. In addition, there's some wetlands that we're working with the Planning and Public Works down here in the south end, all of which TIF money is going to. So as Don alluded to, we have in excess of $11 million of what's called TIF-eligible expenses. However, we're asking for 2.7. So with that, very exciting project, 50 new jobs in this area. We're also going to be coordinating with the corrections facility to get some of that workers over here and see if we can't have a program over there. So on the cusp, again, I'm biased, but this is how you do these projects. So with that, here for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Brennan. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 12 is approved, 7-0. Item 13, a resolution to approve a special use permit to allow general retail sales in the GI district located at 5719 North 16th Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
The public hearing on item 13 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Michael Sands, 1700 Farnam Street, on behalf of the developer. My client, Mitchell Papin, is on as well via Zoom. This project is located at 16th and Stores Expressway. It is a project to construct a Dollar General. This is the current state of the lot. So it's in a considerable...
Hold on just a second. There's a little delay. I don't know why it's going on like that today, but it is. All right, go ahead, Mr. Sands.
So as you can see, the lot is currently in a state of considerable disrepair. Used to be a parking area for the airport. It has not been that for over 6 years now, so it's sat vacant. And I think more importantly than that, our engineer put together this map, what he calls, that's upside down, he calls a food desert map. So the area in which this is located, so the 16th and Stores Expressway area, is considered to be a food desert. And what that means is that residents in the general vicinity have to walk 25 or more blocks to get basic needs, and some of that being across Highway 75, which is obviously comes at considerable danger. So we believe it's a good project. We've been in contact with Councilman Gray, and we appreciate his feedback and support on the project. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Did Mr. Papin wish to speak, or he's just available for questions?
I believe he's just available for questions if you...
Thank you.
So
Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Councilmember Gray, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'll be brief. Normally, this is one of those projects where I have a little bit of heartburn trying to support. But this one, I think, for the area that it's in, and as was stated earlier about the food desert, I think it's important. I think this is a really good site for that, and I think it really serves a portion of the neighborhood really well. And this is one we have talked about, and I shared a conversation with, I believe Mr. Papan is one I talked to as well, too. So I think it's a worthwhile project. And I think it's going to benefit, certain parts of that area, especially some of the low-income area there. So I would encourage, again, my colleagues' support on this project. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is that a motion? No further lights? Roll call.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Brennan. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 13 is approved, 7-0. Item 14, an application to consider a Class C liquor license for a Curie located at 225 North 12th Street, Suite 120. A's communication from the Planning Department regarding a right-of-way lease.
The public hearing on item 14 begins at this time. We have Mr. Huang registered by Zoom. Mr. Huang, need your name and address in your testimony, please.
Hello, I'm Dewey Huang. I'm the owner from Agway. My restaurant located in 225 North 12th Street, suite number 120, Omaha, Nebraska, zip code 68102.
And you're happy to answer any questions?
No.
Yes?
No question.
No, if we have questions, you're happy to answer them, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents in the chamber? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. We have a motion to approve in a second, subject to obtaining a right-of-way lease from the City of Omaha. Roll call.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Brennan. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed, 7-0. Item 15, an application to consider a Class IB liquor license for the sports hall located at 3916 Farnam Street. Is communication from the Planning Department regarding building permits.
The public hearing on item 15 begins at this time. We have Mr. Mike Kelly Plucker, 2894 South 87th Avenue, registered to speak via Zoom for the applicant. Mr. Kelly, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, Mike Kelly, 2804 South 87th Avenue. Let me first of all just take this opportunity to congratulate Council Lady Brennan on her appointment. Look forward to working with you, Council Lady. I'm here appearing for the Sports Hall Inc. LLC, which is moving their operation from 38th and Farnam to 3916 Farnam. The old location, we're still going to keep licensed, and we are close to having that sold to a new operator. If that falls through, we would rebrand that and operate it differently. But it's the same operation, the sports hall. They're just moving a block away. I'm here for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Second, we have a motion to approve subject to obtaining proper permits. And a second, no further lights, roll call.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Brennan. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
Thank you.
Item 16, an application to consider a Class K liquor license for Down Under Lounge located at 3530 Leavenworth Street.
The public hearing on item 16 begins at this time. Are there any proponents?
John Nozel, owner of the Down Under Lounge, 1109 North 49th Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68132. Available for questions.
Thank you. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed. Is it subject to waiving Rule 7? Is that the same with your second? Okay, this takes 5 votes. No further lights, roll call.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Brennan. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
The public hearing on agenda items 17 and 18 were held on December 22, 2020. Council Vice President Palermo, you're recognized.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to remove agenda item 18, please.
Agenda 18 is removed. Is there a motion on item 17? Second. Roll call.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo.
Yes.
Brennan. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 17 is approved 7-0.
Vice President Palermo, you're recognized on item 18.
Thank you, Mr. President. So item 18 we've talked about for a number of weeks, going back a month, and the reason I keep talking about it is because of how important it is. We talk about public works and what it means to not just the citizens of Omaha, but those who travel to and from Omaha. And we know 100 years ago what was important to the city of Omaha. It was your roads and it was your trash. And 50 years ago, what was important to Omaha? Your roads and your trash. So here we are today, and it's still important. And the reason I'm saying it's important is because people care about their roads and trash. So what we have in front of us is a job that was posted. No applicants over that month period had applied. So we downgraded the job. We took away some qualifications. We lessened the pay. And now we have it in front of us. But what I want you to know is this manager job that we're going to vote on today is managing 33 less employees as far as 2 weeks ago in our council meeting, and I'm going to ask Deb Sander to come up to verify that, then they should be managing. And I'll get to why that's important. So Director Sander. I do have a couple questions for you, please.
Deb Sander, City HR.
Yes, Director, can you tell me, last time you spoke, you said that there were some applicants that put in for AEO 1 within the street maintenance department. Can you tell me if we have found a way to find employment for those who passed the test?
Yes, sir. You're correct. In 2 weeks ago, or on December 12th, we had 33 vacancies. Currently, we have 31 vacancies. We hired 2 AEO1s, and we have 9 AEO1s to be hired on the 25th of this month. We had the posting go back up. Posting came down yesterday afternoon because we tested again today and tomorrow to put together another list.
Okay, can you tell me how many people are testing?
I'm not sure of that number.
Okay, because I was going to say that I looked during the meeting and noticed that it wasn't up again, so I'm glad that it was taken down because you're going to be testing.
Yes, we are testing currently today.
Okay, thank you, Director. So what we hear about all the time is Omaha and what a great city it is and how things are different here and we rise above the challenges. But I think for us taking the street maintenance manager position or the engineer position and lessening it to a manager, and keep in mind, this comes with a $116,000 salary. So this is a very good job for whoever it is that's going to seek this employment. And if we know we were 33 employees short, we got 2 out of that batch and 9 more. So we'll just say we're 20 employees short. So we're hiring a manager. Now, these aren't positions that I'm saying, please, let's add them because we need them, because we know as the city grows, we do need them. We have less city employees now and more lane miles than we did 10 years ago. But we're going to worry about and have this on the agenda about hiring a manager for the 20 less employees we have. And even if we use the number 20, I guarantee who's ever listening, you could think about it. Who would like 20 more people to plow your snow the next time it snows? Who would like 20 more people to fill that pothole that you hit on the way to work? Who would like 20 more people to work on your alley, salt your bridges, run the brooms? I mean, these are all jobs that come within the street maintenance department and public works. Omaha's better than that, and until we get serious on hiring these employees, no matter how hard it is, no matter what we have to do, this isn't a vote your conscious vote. This is a vote for what's right of the citizens of Omaha to fill these spots. Now, I think I've talked about it enough that everybody's going to have their own opinion on how they feel. But again, we're all up for re-election except for one person. And if you're not going to be serious about the roads, which has been important to this city for as far back as it goes, then you'll have to answer for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Palermo.
I'd like to make a motion to lay this over. If I could, Mr. President, have the floor again. I'd like to make a motion to lay this over because I know how important this position is, but I know how much more important it is to have the employees for this position. So I'd like to lay it over for a month to see how many more employees we can possibly hire, because this isn't where city services are suffering. Somebody's doing this job now, and maybe the person who's doing this job is actually doing the job and getting paid a higher salary because maybe they're working out of class as an engineer. I don't know. But no city services will suffer while we wait and show how important it is to fill these spots. So I'd like to make a motion to lay this over for 1 month.
The clerk provided a calendar advising us we have availability for February 9 or February 23 on your motion, which is for purposes of forming your motion. Which are you choosing?
Let's go February 23rd. That way, just in case there's a chance to post this again, to have possibly more people apply for it. Again, no city services will suffer, but what we will do is show how important it is to fill these jobs for pothole and concrete and snow plowing, those basic city services that we all expect.
Thank you, Vice President Palermo. Councilmember Melton, you're recognized.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Sanders, can I call you back up real quick? I just wanted to give you the opportunity. It made it sound like you're not filling open positions or that somehow you're failing the citizens of Omaha. And I know you've done a lot of work. Can you please explain how you've attempted to try and fill these positions? You've kept it open. You've actually hired people and you're testing now. I just wanted to give you a little bit of an opportunity to explain what HR has done in order to make sure these jobs get filled.
Yes, ma'am. Deb Sanders, City HR. We continuously post the position of AE01. The only time that we take it down is when we're actually doing testing. So we'll put a posting up for a position for that position for a period of time. Once we take it down, we do the testing. As soon as we certify a new list, then the posting goes back up. So we've had a cycle of that going for the last couple of years to try to fill the AE01 position. That's one of the things we've done. Another thing that we have done is all of the testing. We used to be doing it all in-house. So we had third-party testers that were certified within the city. All of that testing now is being contracted with Metro Community College. So that way individuals that are coming into the city, instead of getting a CDL-B, are receiving a CDL-A. So then that way it gives them more opportunity to advance within the city. One of the reasons why we were lower on AE01s is because we had a round of promotions to MR2, AE02, and AE03. So of course we're pulling from within our own candidates to do that. So if you look back to November when we first looked at this, we were down farther on AE02s, 3s, and MR2s. Again, we did promotions, so then that left our AE01 rank short. So we've been trying to shore that up. And again, we do have positions open there, but we will be hiring 9 people. We have 9 people confirmed for the 25th of January. And as soon as this list is certified, then we will start the interview process in the streets department again to hire as many people as we can that pass the test. The other thing that you may have heard, or I don't know if anybody listens to Marketplace, one of the things that we've seen across the United States, in January of last year, the drug testing went national. So you have to be registered. What we got a lot of was individuals who would have a positive drug test in Iowa would come to work in Nebraska, or Nebraska and Iowa, vice versa, many other neighboring states. Now one of the things that you see is everyone has to register nationally. So if you were drug tested in Iowa and you can't just come over to a different state with a clean slate, all of that is interconnected. So that's another thing that we're running into is positive drug tests that we cannot avoid per DOT.
Okay. And so how many open positions, how many positions are there total? Do you know?
Budgeted in the streets department for snow removal, there are, for the 2021 budget, there are 185 positions that are budgeted. And as of the 12/26 data, we have 154 of them that are filled.
So you have 100, so 100 out of 186, you have 154 filled, you have 9 more people hired, and then that'll go back up again?
Correct, yes. Right, so we have currently 31 vacancies with 9 people to be hired on 125.
But a lot of the AE01s, the reason you have those openings is because you promoted people who are still with the city of Omaha to upper positions. So obviously they can still do their former position, right?
Correct, and all of those classifications, operator 1, 2, and 3, and MR2 are the ones that are primarily responsible for snow removal and street repair, and then they are supervised by the city maintenance foreman ones. So if you look back to our November data that we initially provided, we went from 6 openings in AE02 to 3 openings in AE02. We went from 7 positions, maintenance repair, open to 6. So we have promoted some people.
Okay. All right. And I mean, I think that's good. I'm glad that we've got 8. That should actually help you in recruiting, because it shows that you're, not only are you getting them better CDLs, getting them the A, but then you're also promoting them so that they can make more money in the future. So I think what you're doing is exactly what you should be doing to help that recruitment process, and then promoting from that group that you have. So that obviously if potholes need to be filled, the managers are going to have to go out and work with their guys to fill it too.
Yeah, the foreman one are working supervisors, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Melton. Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'm not opposed to the job classification here. I think that, we allow a department to organize the way they think they need to organize to be effective, and I think this is one of many, maybe over time, that they have in mind to sort of reorganize the department, as we discussed a little bit in the Public Works Committee. But I do want to give a nod to Councilman Palermo, who has been steadfast in his support for filling AE01s and the importance of that to a Public Works Department, and therefore to us, a City Council. And having been for, I guess, two or three years now, behind the ball a little bit when it comes to January and February or March, where we haven't filled those positions, maybe to no one's particular fault, but it just hasn't come to fruition, and had to hire contractors. I definitely don't want to be in that position again. Now, thankfully, we've had a pretty mild winter so far, but if you remember last winter, that was a problem, and a big problem. And I don't want to be in that position again, and again behind the ball, should it come to that. So I don't mind keeping some intensity around this issue of hiring AE01s around the classes that were just discussed, making sure we actually get those numbers hired and reposted, and seeing what those numbers can produce prior to this being approved. And frankly, I think it sends a nice message to the workers in that department that we're giving attention to that first before we're giving attention maybe to a supervisory position or a management position. One question for you, Ms. Sanders, along those lines. The motion on the floor right now would be to delay this job classification until February 23rd. This is just a classification. If it's approved, or when it's approved, you would then seek to post for that job. So it would take some additional time after that. But there's no implication in the short term otherwise in terms of that delay, in terms of anything expiring or any kind of listing you have, or any kind of implication to what's happening here?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Festerson. Ms. Sander, I would just ask you a few questions. Is there anyone who is acting in this capacity now without benefit of this classification?
There is someone that is acting, and they are being paid working out of class. That's correct. But not in this classification because it does not yet exist.
Okay, what classification are they being paid in?
The CE4 position.
So Civil Engineer 4.
Yes, sir.
Is the person who is working out of class, without identifying that individual, is that person a engineer?
No.
Okay. Does the CE4 position have within its job description possessing the qualification that they be an engineer?
That's part of the qualifications for Civil Engineer 4, yes. But when you're working out of class, if you're covering for a period of time when there's a vacancy there, then you don't have to meet every single one of the requirements as long as you're doing the vast majority of the job.
Okay. And so in terms of the level of pay that the individual who's working out of class is being paid, is the CE4, or what is the abbreviation for Civil Engineer Level 4 position, higher than what we're seeing here in the $92,893 to $116,771?
The whole range for Civil Engineer 4 is higher than the range for this particular job, but the differential that the individual would be making is the step that is closest to. So it would be the lowest step in the upper level, the CE4 range.
Okay. So we have a non-engineer working out of class being paid more than what's being advertised, supervising between 30 or 21 less AE01s as a part of that person's watch. That doesn't make financial sense to me when I am constantly asked by constituents to explain what they think is funny math with how the city decides to make financial decisions.
At the same time, you have a Civil Engineer 4 position that is vacant. And there's no one receiving a full salary. The way working out of class works, you only get the differential when you're actually working. So holidays, vacation time, those kinds of things don't count towards that. So you're never going to make with the differential that entire salary. So also with the vacancy, there's usually a 30% differential for benefits. We are not paying benefits on a vacant position. So as far as financial sense, if you could get away with it, you'd work someone out of class as long as you could, because that's always going to cost you less money than filling a full-time position, whether it's the new one that we're creating or the CE4 as a full-time position.
What was the job title of the CE4 who last occupied that position?
It was Civil Engineer 4, and it was the street maintenance. The subtitle, I guess you'd call it, is Street Maintenance Manager, just like the construction manager is also a Civil Engineer 4.
Well, let me ask you this. Has anyone constrained your ability to fill any of the vacant positions in AE01 for budgetary reasons or other?
No, we have budget, and we're continuously trying to fill those positions because there is budget, and we have had approval even through the pandemic to fill AE01 positions.
Is there a plan to eliminate a CE4 position if this is approved?
I don't know about that.
There's
That would be
nothing in the works.
Yeah, that would be a Public Works budget question.
Mr. Stubbe? Thank you, Ms. Sander.
Bob Stubbe, Public Works.
Who is the individual working out of class in this position, CE4?
He currently is a superintendent, I believe is the title.
Okay.
So maybe just to go back a little bit with regard to the history. So we had a street maintenance engineer that had left the city. The city posted for a street maintenance engineer, which gets paid the CE4 class of wage. That particular opening, we got some applicants, none of them were qualified. That's when we kind of stepped back and said, how are we going to fill that particular position? And I think that's when HR and Public Works went out and looked at other communities to see what they were doing. And we did not have this particular classification within all of the classifications within the city, but this classification that's in front of you today matched closely with a lot of those other communities. So we looked at, okay, let's create this particular class that is lower than the CE4, but above the current superintendent position. And the intent would be then is to go out and openly competitive, post this particular position to see if we get applicants for this particular job.
If this position for job description is approved, goes into effect 14 days after its approval, would the person who is working out of class have their working out of class position modified to this position, to the new street maintenance manager?
I'm not totally sure I understand your question, but the individual that's currently working out of class, his current pay would be less than what this particular position would be. So he, along with anybody else, would have the ability, once this position get posted, to then apply for this particular posting and be an applicant for the position.
And that was another question I was going to ask you, but my question is, the person who is a superintendent working out of class as a CE4 presently, would that person continue on as a CE4 until this position would be filled? Or would that change to a street maintenance manager?
He would continue to be paid out of class until...
In what capacity, though?
As kind of the supervisor of street maintenance.
At the level of pay of a CE4 or of a street maintenance manager?
Once the position exists, then it would be adjusted to this position's salary. Because this position doesn't exist, The previous position was the CE4, so that's the differential. And then once this position exists, the differential would be to this position that we're trying to fill that there would be a vacancy for.
Okay.
Am I making sense?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. So that's why we have HR directors, Mr.
That's
Stewart.
why we have HR.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, this is an interesting situation because, you know, on the one hand, the longer we wait to decide whether to approve this position, we have someone who's not an engineer working in an engineer's position that's somehow been approved. For how long or under what circumstances, I'm not going to put Mr. Kuzi on the spot today. That would be unfair. He has a team that could give us an answer to that, and we may just do that. But you know, I have said for the last few years that I am really uncomfortable with the level of service provided in the spring by the city and in terms of pothole patrol, and my displeasure with resorting to having to use expensive contractors because we have so many vacant AE01 positions. And I suspect, in addition to having been a former employee in that division, Mr. Palermo's passion comes from the condition that he sees in the streets in his district that drives these issues. And I respect that. I respect that more than worrying about a 1-month layover to assess what are we doing to improve the circumstances that then lead more people to apply for and be hired by the city in these positions. And if we're not paying our AE01s competitively enough, then I, for one, would support that we look at the compensation range on those so that we do have it competitively priced, just like we did for the upper level engineers. And they came to us, I think it was Mr. Fitzer, and said, listen, we can't compete for engineers. We're short of engineers. We need engineers. We have all of these demands of engineers, and we can't compete. And so we changed that. And he has been able to hire engineers. And, you know, as the city's engineer, if he's telling me they're not competitive, I believe him. I take him at his word on that. And hopefully, by doing what we did, we address that. But I don't understand when we have as gaping of a hole and need, the size of which I think just is going to continue to grow. Because let's just assume that this is approved. The person working out of class happens to be the only one applies, and Public Works says, okay, this person's good enough for us, regardless of what anyone else thinks about him, and we think he or she will do a good job, and they put that person in the position. Then there's another backfilling, who's going to be the superintendent, and then who's going to move up to the higher level foreman, and who's going to push up, and that's going to create at least one more vacancy at the bottom of the ladder. So the situation here isn't improving, and I think this layover request will allow us to really get serious about what are we going to do, knowing we're coming into the spring, knowing it's pothole season soon. Because I'm going to tell you, like I said last year, I am not going to vote to use contractors to fill potholes when we should be employing the people to do that in this city. And we can do it for a lot more affordable rates, a lot more efficiently by professionals with people who know how to do it or trained how to do it, and that's a big part of all they do. And so I'll be supporting the layover for this time. But I think, given what we've learned about we're actually paying this person more than we could be, it's not going to be for too long. because I've shared with Mr. Fitzer and maybe even Mr. Stubbe is that maybe in what this person does in this position in a former life as chairman of the Public Works Committee, maybe we need someone who's not a manager, but more of a strategic person in terms of here's what we need to do and here's how we're going to do it and here's the allocation of people to do it. You know, that I don't necessarily think you have to be an engineer to do that. So I support them in that vision, and I've told them that before. But I don't necessarily think that 1 month wait is to address this other issue and have more of a plan in place is a bad idea. So, Councilmember Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's interesting that we're contemplating holding this back to make it dependent or tie it directly to the hiring of another position. I don't want to be in the same situation for the filling of this position if it's approved because we've delayed it by another month or so. But I've heard the director say that it's not going to negatively impact that, at least at this point. I would get concerned if we're doing it any longer, and I understand Councilman Palermo has asked for Vice President Palermo has asked for the layover, so I will support it for this time. But I think it's interesting that we're going to put ourselves in the same position. It's to maybe get behind the 8 ball when we're looking to hire for this position. But in deference to the request, I'll support it this time.
Thank you, Councilmember Harding. Vice President Palermo, you're recognized.
And thank you, Mr. President. And you always bring up very good questions. And being on the Public Works Committee, chairing it for that matter, I was not aware that somebody was filling this manager spot out of class, making more money. I was under the assumption that, at least what I heard, what we were told on the committee was it was being done internally where somebody was doing a couple jobs. So that could have changed, and I understand there's a lot of moving parts. But let me say this, Director Sander and Director Stubbe are the best of the best. This is not a reflection on them. I know you have to do your job, but I also have to do mine, right? We both answer to different people, but for the same outcome. And I think if you followed along and you thought, well, gosh, Councilman Palermo, of course there's openings. These people have all been promoted. That's just not the truth. Some people have got promotions, and that's great, because that's how it should be. But many people have transferred out. Many people have went to seek outside employment, and some have just been straight fired. And that's where we are. And what else wasn't mentioned, because I wasn't going to bring it up, is the fact that there's 14, and I take that back, there's 15 Foreman 1, but there's not one opening. They're all filled. So what we're doing is we're saying, hey, you employees who do the work, you employees who actually do the work that matter to us, you're not important as the manager who's going to manage you. Again, we're worried about, and this is on the agenda with a 30-month closing date because nobody applied for a manager, and we're still 31 employees short. Again, you're doing your job. I understand that. I'm doing mine. 15 management positions and Foreman 1s, not one opening. Operator 1, 2, MR2, and Operator 3 that keep us moving as a city in street maintenance. 31 openings. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second for I think Councilmember Festerson seconded.
Roll call.
Roll call.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo.
Yes.
Brennan. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
The public hearings on agenda items 19 through 43 are today. If you wish to address the City Council regarding these items, please come to the microphone or wait if you're on Zoom till we call on you. Indicate the agenda item number you wish to address. Identify yourself by your name, address, who you represent, if you are a proponent or opponent, and then provide your testimony. Is there anyone in the council chamber wishing to speak on any item on the consent agenda? Welcome.
Matthew Lamar, 4827 Pierce Street, Omaha. I'm speaking on item 42, and I'm speaking in opposition to item 42. Item number 42 grants the Omaha Police Department money from the Drug Enforcement Agency to further crack down on the use and possession of cannabis in the city of Omaha. This grant is not merely intended to stop the sale, distribution, or interstate movement of cannabis, but the DEA's grant specifically directs the Omaha Police Department to, quote, gather and report intelligence data relation to the possession of cannabis and to, quote, make arrests under controlled substance laws. These funds are explicitly intended to target and arrest nonviolent users of cannabis. At a time when our prison systems in Nebraska is overflowing and our city and state are still facing the brutal reality of a two-tiered criminal justice system, we should not be providing funds to arrest nonviolent drug users. It is far past time for cannabis to be legalized both in our state and across the country. Thankfully, there was a petition drive to put the question of the legalization of cannabis before the people of Nebraska in 2022. In the meantime, I would strongly encourage you to reject any funding which is specifically intended to arrest nonviolent cannabis users, which will further exacerbate the problems of our overcrowded prisons and has the potential to ruin the lives of countless nonviolent drug users. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lamar. Are there any other proponents or opponents in the chamber wishing to speak on the consent agenda resolutions? Seeing none, we'll now move to the Zoom registrants. First, we have Sarah Johnson, 2316 North 52nd Street. Ms. Johnson, welcome.
Thank you. Again, my name is Sarah Johnson, 2316 North 52nd Street, and I'm here today to speak regarding items 40 through 42. Allocating over $72,000 to the Omaha Police Department. I think they'd ideally be pulled from the consent agenda for further discussion. Item 40 is for a contract with Lexipol for training. I looked at their policeoneacademy.com website, and while they don't address white supremacy specifically, even under their terrorism segment, they do have an entire section dedicated to motivation and humor. After the deadly event at the Capitol last week, it's more clear now than ever that we need to name and address the issue of white supremacist extremism, which according to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security is one of the most potent forces driving domestic terrorism. I'm concerned that this isn't going to be adequately addressed with this proposed training program. Racism has been declared a public health crisis by Dr. Poor, but I haven't seen enough discussion on how you're continuing to address it. There's been a lot of talk regarding the COVID crisis, and rightfully so, but apparently you pick and choose which emergencies are worth responding to consistently. So if we're spending more and more money on police training, we need to make sure it's specifically addressing the growing prevalence of these racist white power groups, including the Proud Boys, which showed up at both the insurrection last week and at this summer's Back the Blue rally right here in Omaha. Despite being one of the best funded, most well-trained, accredited police forces in the country, as you like to remind us, the OPD said they hadn't even heard of the Proud Boys. How can that be? As far as the drunk driving agenda, item number 41, I don't think anyone agrees that driving while intoxicated is good, but we do need to address the fact that Black and brown residents are disproportionately affected by these targeted stops. I shouldn't have to remind you that Kenneth Jones had less than 2 minutes to realize this fact before he was killed by an officer a few months ago during a traffic stop. Yes, he was intoxicated and impaired his decision-making ability. He ended up dead. How are we to believe officers will react without deadly force the next time they encounter someone in this state? Is this funding really going to help? Finally, please vote no on 42. Like the last guy was saying, this is kind of silly. Suppression of illicit cannabis. $10,000 allocated to something that has overwhelming bipartisan support in Nebraska and across the country, which doesn't pose an imminent threat nor violence to our community, doesn't make sense. Even though it's a grant, we should say no thanks. The Gallup organization found that 68% of Americans favor the legalization of marijuana, and our own state legislature is addressing this issue currently. I know Mr. Festerson agrees with me that $10,000 isn't really going to do anything anyway, and said he agrees with and supports the marijuana legalization ballot initiative. So thank you, Pete, for replying to my email. Appreciate it. Ideally, I'd like to see less money going to the police in general and more resources devoted to truly addressing the root causes of violence and crime in our community. More funding needs to go to the nonprofits dedicated to our ever-increasing homeless population and those with food and job insecurity. We know that once people are without homes and food, that they're more likely to encounter the police, who then see them as criminals rather than those in need of our help. We are always so reactionary, but the way to truly address these issues is by being proactive. Douglas County is actually doing some good work in this regard by looking at policing alternatives like the Cahoots program that has seen great success in Oregon. I'd really like to see the city partner with the county on these types of initiatives and implement something similar here. They're also allocating significant funding to community organizations doing important work around food and housing insecurity. I hope you will increase city resources going towards these important causes, as I'd prefer to see those entities receiving weekly funding rather than always just the police. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. The next person registered is Mr. David Carney of 5813 Lafayette Avenue. Mr. Carney, you're recognized.
Hi, thank you. I'm speaking in opposition to item 40, allocating $48,000 to the police training through Police One Academy. It absolutely makes sense to me that the police should have a remote digitized training platform, and I see that Police One Academy has features allowing OPD to upload their own training materials. That seems like a useful service, but what I'm concerned about are the contents inside the training material they provide. I'm going to focus on one trainer since I was already familiar with his body of work. Included in the training provided by Police One Academy are lessons from Dave Grossman. Yesterday, I sent an email with links to his videos and the articles I'll be citing. In a conversation with an OPD officer last year, he called me a sheep and himself a sheepdog, language that is directly referencing Grossman's training called The Sheep, the Wolf, and the Sheepdog. So I suspect that this is training that OPD is already implementing. I'd like Omaha to join Minneapolis, who has stopped city-funded warrior culture-style training, and I'd like to share some thoughts from the conversation that happened around that when Minneapolis implemented it. The Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frey, said, quote, "Fear-based trainings violate the values at the very heart of community policing. When you're conditioned to believe that every person encountered poses a threat to your existence, you simply cannot be expected to build out meaningful relationships with those same people," end quote. Frey specifically mentioned the classes taught to police in Minnesota and the rest of the country by Dave Grossman. Grossman is the author of On Killing, the Psychological Cost to Learning to Kill in War and Society, a book that promotes the training of a theory he calls killology that promotes the mindset needed to take human life. Retired Minneapolis Police Sergeant Michael Quinn, a former trainer at the Minneapolis Police Academy, told NBC that courses like killology instill a dangerous mindset. Quote, "You end up with this hyper-vigilant mode all the time. If you fear for your life on every little startling moment in this job, you're in the wrong job," end quote. Police Academy 1 is offering these problematic courses that they're referencing, along with another one that advocates for citizens to conceal carry in schools, and I'm not really sure why that's included in police training. Seems like a policy matter. The UNL criminal justice professor Samuel Walker, an expert in police accountability, said in 2017 to Mother Jones, "The bulletproof warrior approach is okay for Green Berets, but unacceptable for domestic policing. The best police chiefs in this country don't want anything to do with this," end quote. I believe this type of training and mindset leads to things like the killings of Zachary Bearheels, Kenneth Jones, and the violent response from OPD that I've personally seen at nonviolent protests. In his video, The Sheep, the Wolf, and the Sheepdog, Grossman says, quote, "Many people will tell you in private, one-on-one, that when I've had to shoot the bad guy, it was the culminating achievement of a lifetime of preparation. It was the ultimate achievement of my lifetime," end quote. When cops are violently arresting bad guys for marching in the street, I don't want them having training that the best point in their life is going to be killing someone. Please vote no on this and ban warrior culture style training before approving any more money spent towards police training programs. Otherwise, you're giving your consent to this type of training. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, the public hearing is closed. Councilmember Festerson, Councilmember Gray, you're first in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I would like to remove item 42. I would like to remove item 40. Oh, it's on now. Okay. All right.
As I said before, there's a little bit of a delay to technology.
I would like to remove item 42 from the consent agenda.
For the vote, right?
For the vote.
Okay.
I would like to remove that. I would like to call up Lieutenant Fox, though.
because I did see the video related to the warrior training that was sent by Mr. Carney, and and there were some portions of that did bother me a little bit, but in our pre-meeting this morning, my understanding was the police department was going to pick and choose and not necessarily buy into all of what that training is about. But I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to address this.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to talk. So
we need your name and address for the
Ken
record.
Fox. I'm a lieutenant with the Omaha Police Department, 505 South 15th Street.
Thank you. Please proceed.
First of all, Police One is a platform it has about 1,400 courses that you can take. And this platform will enhance our ability to give out training to the entire department, especially like someone said earlier with COVID, that is important. We want to make sure that we do the best we can to keep everyone safe and not have so many people at the academy at once with what's been going on with the pandemic. And also, we want to make sure that we can tailor certain trainings to individuals that need it instead of having broad-based training, and then we have certain officers that need some training in certain situations to handle deficiencies. Our department, and we know with the leadership of Tod Zoning that we are not a warrior mentality department. We haven't been for a long time, especially underneath his leadership. The trainings that will be offered to our officers will be vetted by Tod Zoning, then Deputy Chief Gonzalez, then Captain Hareen, then myself, and then Sergeant Taylor, who is our training coordinator in the academy. So there are going to be a lot of people involved in making sure that the training that we choose and we put out to the department will be desirable, right? Will not be undesirable to the department and won't be divisive to the relationship that we built. So I appreciate what they're saying, and that's basically. And I'm not sure. I have a list of trainings that I can pass out. I can give you guys. I've highlighted some. Implicit bias being one. That's very important. They have a bunch of community-based trainings on there. Anti-bias training. De-escalation training. So there's a lot of things that the citizens have been calling for, and also the state, being on the cusp of having upping our continuing education from I believe from 20 to I believe 40 is kind of what's happening or what's going to happen. This would be a great way for us to not bring in 900 officers off the street multiple times. We're already having a hard time with the 20 hours. So this will be a great opportunity for us to continue to have officers on the street and handling service calls and being in our communities versus trying to figure out how we get them to the academy. And then again, like I said, COVID earlier. So these trainings are going to be vetted by, as I said before, a lot of individuals that are decision makers and leaders in our department. We would never promote, training that would not be, progressive in our relationships that we have with the community.
Thank you, Lieutenant. I just wanted you to have an opportunity to, to address what this is. I will be supportive of items 40 and 41. I will not be supportive of item 42 for a number of reasons. And one has to do with the number of individuals of color who are languishing in jails behind this foolishness that relates to marijuana. We're talking about even building another jail, which is I am absolutely opposed to. But for me, I think this training is necessary and good. I also agree with 41, but 42 I won't be supporting. That's why I asked to take it off of the agenda. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Gray. Councilmember Festerson, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. Just a few follow-up questions for you there to Lieutenant Fox on 40, 41, and 42. I do think that's a reasonable explanation you gave over the online training and that subscription, and we talked about it this morning at length too. The one other question I received about it that also was answered this morning that perhaps you can confirm is that the $47,000 is not in addition to the police department's budget, but is part of the current budget of the police department.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. That's my understanding too. And then on 41 and 42, those amounts are so small, they wouldn't normally even appear on our agenda. But I think the reason why they do is because they straddle more than one calendar year in terms of that grant award. And as we discussed this morning, they aren't funding new initiatives, but they do, I think, defray costs of some things the police department is already doing, in particular overtime costs. And as was discussed, the drunk driving operation, I think, does have some merit, but I do share some of Councilman Gray's concerns about number 42. Can you talk a little bit more about the explanation I was given was this would defray some police overtime costs as it applies to what the department is already doing on I-80 with the K-9 unit and presumably large shipments of drugs that are going up and down the interstate, which does happen. But that's very different than the language that was just cited by Mr. Lamar's that I do find a bit concerning. Can you explain the difference there?
I absolutely cannot. That's not my department, so I actually have no knowledge of that. I'm a training commander, so I'm here to speak on 40. I apologize.
No problem.
I don't want to give you any bad information.
Yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot either. And I know sometimes grant language can be very detailed and sometimes doesn't always reflect what the money is actually used for in broad categories. But I do share Councilman Gray's concern on that item. I don't see any other lights. We did remove number 42 from consent. I would move to approve 19 through 41 and 43.
We have a motion, a second. I just have a couple of questions. We usually have Captain Reyes here who can explain this, or the city's grant coordinator. I don't see either of them here today. In terms of what I was told as well, on item number for the interdiction on item number 42, we were told this morning at pre-council this was only for I-80 drug interdiction in terms of interstate transportation of drugs, including marijuana, that was for interdiction. And I don't see anyone here to confirm that on the record. And then hearing what Mr. Lamar was reading from the grant, I think I'd like an explanation of that. Because as it stands today, when that one comes up, I might be inclined to, from what I just heard from in the app, and I'm trying to pull it up here, but I'm trying to run the meeting as well. I'm concerned with that. In terms of the educational component, in reading between the lines of what you were saying, but not hearing you actually say it, but I'd like you to confirm on the record, there's no online content that you or Chief Schmatter or Captain Hareen are going to approve on this killology stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's not something that we teach in the academy. I'm the training commander. Before being promoted to lieutenant, I was the training sergeant. So I handled the recruits going through the academy process. We have never taught that type of language. We never used that language, and we haven't taught that in our academy.
Okay. Well, on the other item for 42, which will have a separate vote, I think you were also present when Captain Reyes spoke this morning, and
I was outside the room,
okay,
so I didn't hear him. I didn't hear him speak. I apologize.
Captain Hareen, would you come down?
No, that's not Captain.
That's not Captain Hareen. You look like Captain Hareen from 30 yards. Sorry about that. That just shows you how eyewitnesses are not reliable.
Coming from a lawyer.
Okay. Well, I will state for the record to my constituent who lives down the hill from me that we were told this morning by Captain Reyes, who asked us to approve this. This is only for the I-80 interdiction work. When you're driving on the interstate, you see the K-9 unit. This is all they're intending to use that for, not to be going into our local streets and using this for that. So I I know Mr. Reyes, or Captain Reyes, Central Eagle grad himself, had it emblazoned on him. I take him as a man of his word and a man of integrity, and that he wouldn't misrepresent that. So for item 42, with that representation, that's why I support that item. Thank you. We have some more lights. Mr. Kuzi, did you have your light on? Okay, we can turn that off. Mr. Festerson, you're recognized.
It's on now.
Oh,
Only to say that in my other job as the city prosecutor, I can tell you that on item 42, the $10,000 is towards I-80 interstate interdiction work. It's not involving looking for low user amounts of marijuana. These are for people in state and out of state who are driving along I-80 who get found with voluminous amounts of marijuana. With regard to some of the language that's contained within the application and in the resolution, that was simply plucked. That's the language that the DOJ, the Department of Justice, and the Drug Enforcement Agency chooses to use. Those were not the words that the city put into the resolution. That was lifted from the grant language itself. So to the extent that that helps the council, I thought I would chime in.
Thank you. Councilmember Gray, your light is on.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. You know, the only problem that I have with that is that that's what's always said. But a lot of times what ends up happening is not actually what went down. And that's the concern that I have, especially when you're talking about, I would encourage everybody in this room, there's a documentary that you can stream on the BET network. And I would encourage people to watch this 2-hour documentary called Smoke, Blacks in America. I think you ought to, I think it would be a good thing for us to look at because a lot of what my concern has to do with what we say and then what really ends up actually happening. And this marijuana thing has been so detrimental to black and brown people across this country and in this city that I'm just not willing to do it at this point. I just won't. And I'm not encouraging anybody to vote differently or vote just vote your conscience. But for me, this is an issue that has affected direly folks in District 2 and District 4 specifically, and other areas as well. It has disproportionately affected black and brown people. It is not something that I could see myself supporting at this point in time, even though what they say is this just going to be for I-80. I'm concerned that there are other opportunities to use this in a way that might not be the best for the community. So I'm hoping people can prove me wrong in this particular instance, but because of what's going on with marijuana around the country, because of what my concerns are about the number of black and brown people who are incarcerated simply for using, it's not something I'm going to do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Gray. We have a motion to approve consent agenda resolutions except for item 42, and we have a second. No further lights. Roll call.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Brennan. Yes. Festerson. Yes. Gray.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0.
What's the pleasure of the council on item 42? We have a motion, a second to deny. No further lights. Roll call.
Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Mr. President.
No.
Motion failed 3-4.
Is there an alternative motion? Roll call.
Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. No, oh, sorry. Festerson. Gray. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 4-3. Item 44, an ordinance to transfer a permanent easement and land to MUD to relocate facilities located near South 68th Street between Mercy Road and West Center Road.
The public hearing on item 44 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 45, an ordinance approving the issuance of a purchase order to Dale's Trash Service, Inc. for trash collection services for a 3-year price agreement totaling $346,923.
The public hearing on item 45 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 46, an ordinance to accept the bid from Tab Construction for the Omaha Traffic Maintenance Facility Site Improvements Phase 1 project in the amount of $279,799.53.
The public hearing on item 46 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 47, an ordinance to accept the bid of Abe's Trash Service, Inc. at a total cost of $21,138 to provide rubbish container services for the Omaha Fire Department.
The public hearing on item 47 begins at this time. Are there any proponents? Are there any opponents? The public hearing is closed.
Item 48, an ordinance to approve an interlocal agreement with the City of Papillion to administer portions of the City of Papillion Clean Energy Assessment District and PACE program.
The public hearing on item 48 begins at this time. Are there any proponents or opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 49, DPS LLC appeals the rejection of their bid from December 2nd, 2020 for the 2021 Major Street ADA curb ramps.
Madam Clerk, can we consider both DPS appeals?
I will defer to the Law Department, but my guess is no. Ryan is here.
Ryan is here,
Okay.
but the answer is no.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take up item 49 at this time. Is there a representative from DPS LLC, who wants to come up, identify yourself and the basis of your appeal?
Hi, my name is Jason Armstrong, DPS 3704 L Street. I guess the basis for the appeal, we're a Tier 1 contractor with the City of Omaha, and the EEIP program involves inclusion of Tier 1 contractors into the program. So we did 4 bids that particular day. 2 of them were under $500,000, 2 were over. The 2 that were under didn't have to have the EEIP paperwork filled out. The 2 that are over were required to. I was under the understanding that since we were a Tier 1 contractor and 100% of the funds were going to a Tier 1 contractor, that we didn't have to fill out the paperwork. Then we got a letter dated December 14th, 2 letters, 1 for each OPW number, showing that our bids were rejected because the EEIP wasn't turned in. So those were dated December 14th. We received them December 16th. We turned in our EEIP paperwork December 17th. Whether that's overturned or not overturned, we'll be fine as a contractor. We've done work with the City of Omaha in many facets, and it's just a division of what we do. My concern is that if it's not turned over, that we are taking on these 2 contracts approximately $40,000 of taxpayer money that they approved a bond on to get work done and spending them with another contractor. And I think it's just a waste of $40,000 of the taxpayers' money. Again, we'll be fine one way or another. We'll bid another project and we'll move forward. It's a kind of a technicality of paperwork and dates, and happened to be the renewal time of our Tier 1, which we got to renew like every 5 years approximately or so, and it landed in there, and there was just a date of when the paperwork was on the gentleman's desk and when he got it approved. So it's what it is either way. For the last decade or so, we have never failed on a contract for the city. Anything we've done, whether it's snow removal, city sludge haul, street work, sidewalk work, we've been successful. We received this paperwork on December 16th. We addressed it. We had it resolved on December 17th, a day later. It's how we handle everything. We don't let nothing go. We don't let anything slide through the cracks. We handle everything very professionally and do the best job we can. So I'm asking an appeal on both of these. I don't know if you want me to stay up here separately and state the same thing for both of them.
What we can do when we get to the next item is, if there's no objection, you can say your name, address, and I incorporate by reference my remarks on the previous item in this item, and then we'll do that if there's no objection, so you don't
Sure.
have to go through it again. But at this time, what we're going to do is bring up Heather Tippy Pierce to explain the city side of the appeal.
Sure.
So if you could sit down in the second row and have Ms. Tippy Pierce come up. If you could, just, we're trying to have social distancing. Yeah, second row, please. Thank you.
Yep, no worries.
And by the way, the city Public Works has always said good things about your work, so.
Heather Tippy Pierce, Public Works. As to the EEIP requirement per the council's resolution, all contracts with an engineer's estimate over $500,000 are required to have the EEIP. What we use as kind of the line in the sand is that EEIP should be at least a completed draft version. And in order to socialize that with our bidders, we include that requirement in the instruction to bidders. We provide HR&R's template at the end of that section. We provide additional reference to it in the bid form itself, and we provide a checklist for the bidders that indicates this EEIP requirement. And finally, we include a fly sheet in the submittal section of the bid form that specifically states, please replace this with your draft EEIP. I believe that the instructions are fairly clear as to the bidder's requirements. We did see this in an evaluation of an earlier bid that DPS was not a low bidder on and sent DPS a courtesy notification. There, I believe, was then ensuing conversation between HR&R and DPS. I was reviewing the bids for the December 2nd bid, and that's what this bid is from. And at that time, there was no valid EEIP on file. There was no draft EEIP submitted with the bid, and therefore we kind of forward that what they did submit, which was basically HR&R's template marked not applicable, to HR&R to see if even that could be considered enough. That did not meet HR&R's criterion, so in conjunction with the Human Rights and Relations Department, we support this rejection and believe that the appeal should be overturned for consistency and clarity's sake.
Thank you. I see no lights, so I'll just take this opportunity to ask Mr. Wiesen to come down and answer a couple questions I have for him. Mr. Wiesen, would you identify yourself, please?
Ryan Wiesen, Assistant City Attorney.
Now, the appellant, the owner of the DPS, has made a point here. Hey, if I'm essentially approved now, this is, if you don't, retroactively approve my bid, now that I'm compliant, it's going to cost the city on this item and the next one, around $40,000, and that's the taxpayers who are paying for this. And that is true, right? We're paying the second low bidder more because they are the compliant bidder with the lowest bid who responded to the bid specifications, right?
I don't have any reason to doubt those figures, but I'll defer to Public Works on the value of the contracts.
They're approximates, but they're basically in line with what we were told at a pre-council today, plus or minus a little bit, but close. As I see it, there's this pressing legal compliance issue that looms much larger in terms of this appeal, and that is that if we have bids that do not comply with the technical requirements that the city sets forth, and then we, sitting as a Board of Appeals, as the council, were to grant that appeal, that we unknowingly could create precedent or open the doors to have anyone who is then non-compliant for whatever technical reason or of any magnitude, then could come in and say, well, you granted DPS's appeal when they were not compliant, so therefore the city does not enforce its bid requirements, and you shouldn't enforce it for me either. And then that makes your job in court next door basically impossible to defend. Is that something that you would agree with?
I would.
Okay. So as I see this, sir, you have a good company, and you have a company that does great work in many areas for the city. And as I said before, I've not heard a bad word from anyone in Public Works about the job that you do, and hopefully you'll want to continue to grow your business and continue to, as a part of your growth, to do business with the city. But I believe, based upon what our lawyer is telling us and has told us on other appeals similar to yours, that our hands are essentially tied, and that if we were to make this exception for you, we then open the door with precedent to anyone who appeals cases. And so that's why I'm not in a position to support this. And this has nothing to do with the fact that the lowest responsive, compliant bidder happens to be from my district, because you have a very passionate believer in your business who's to my left, where your business is domiciled. So, and his light's on next. So I'd like to hear from Vice President Palermo. Thank you, Mr. Wiesen.
And there we go. Thank you, Mr. President. And you're exactly right. You spelled that out as plain as it can be. We haven't voted yet, but this isn't going to be approved for what you've just heard. So now we got to look at moving forward, because, correct, you're in my district. Your employees live in my district. This is what we do. We support our own, like we support everybody. And the word earlier used by Mrs. Tippy Pierce, I think I remember murky. And it's been murky on a lot of these bids for a while, with just the smallest infraction not being put in place, which sets it up for our city law department just to not give us the recommendation to approve it. And you know why, being a business owner. So it shows how in 2021, the need that we need to have in place for an electronic bidding system for everybody. Because we have had so many discussions of how the paragraph reads, and is it they or we or we're, or how do you decipher what this terminology means? And it shouldn't be that way. And it all comes back to something not being included in the bid. So I can't stress how important it is. We need to continue moving forward for this electronic system for everybody's benefit. And if you ask how we're going to pay for it, look at 49, 50, and 51 on today's agenda. You've probably just paid for it for the year. And we've had so many of these over the past year, you've probably paid for it for 10 years. My comments also will apply to 50 and 51. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Palermo. We have no further lights. Is there a motion?
Can I make another statement?
Not unless the council member calls you up, but you're going to come up in a minute anyway, so you can leave it in there. Okay, roll call.
Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 50, DPS LLC appeals rejection of their bid from December 2nd, 2020 for the 2021 residential concrete curb ramp construction, various locations south of Dodge.
Jason Armstrong, DPS 3704 L Street. Totally understand the position you guys are coming from. I get it. There's legalities. I've learned a lesson here. So I've bid contracts with the city of Omaha that are over $500,000. We have been awarded, and there was no EIP involved with them. So this is the first time I've had to deal with it. So moving forward, I will be in a position on these things, but the tables can possibly turn. Maybe I'm in second place and I'm $100,000 or $200,000 higher than somebody else that didn't know better. The challenge is that comes at the taxpayer's expense. And I understand the legal precedents. I own 5 different businesses, so I understand the decision you have to make. I think it's probably the correct decision, even though I prefer it to go the other way. I live in District 4. I have 3 businesses in District 4, so I appreciate, Vinny, all your statements and trying. But everybody has a responsibility, and I appreciate every one of you doing yours for the city. The reason I didn't get it filled out correctly is because I thought it was to include Tier 1 contractors, so I did put non-applicable. I don't think that paperwork is incorrect. I don't think it's missing anything, but without an understanding of what it is, these contracts are very in-depth, and they're all different. Every single one of them is different. So if there was something electronic where you couldn't go on to the next step until the previous step was completed, it might do one of two things. It's going to either get the city the more competitive bid and get contractors qualified, or it's going to deter contractors from filling out the paperwork and they won't even submit a bid. So it might help in one regard, might hurt in another. I mean, there's no crystal ball to know what any of that happens with any of that, but I do respect everybody on the council, and I appreciate your time to hear me.
Thank you, and I would just take this moment to highlight and repeat what Council Vice President Palermo said. You know, in our ordinary lives, we deal with the electronic platform in our every single day almost. And we're asked to fill in information, and if you don't do it right, it won't let you move on to the next step.
Correct.
And I'm so relieved to hear the Public Works Department is moving towards this electronic platform that'll have that kind of set up, because it would never have allowed you to go submit until you would have discovered, hey, I have to do this anyway. And you would have filled out an outline or a detailed plan or a general proposed plan and uploaded it, submitted it, and you would be not here today.
Correct. I had my EIP done in less than 12 hours from the time I found the letter. I had it completed, submitted, and then the following day it was approved. So I will be better because of it. As a contractor, I'll be in a better position in the future going forward because of it. And like I said, as a company, we're going to be fine. It is what it is. I hate to see the taxpayers lose $40,000 here and God knows how much there. It seems unfair. When they voted to approve bonds, I don't think that was the taxpayers' intentions. I don't think it's the council's intentions at this point either. But I'm glad to hear at least it's getting addressed in some facet, and everybody's trying. That's all you can do, you know?
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Is there a motion on item 50? Roll call.
Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Item 51, Great Plains Tree Care appeals rejection of their bid from December 16th, 2020 for the 2021 tree and stump removal at various locations.
I take it you're the representative from Great Plains Tree.
Yes, sir.
Would you please provide your name and address and the basis for your appeal?
My name is Amy Nakai, and it's in Nancy, AKAI, and my address is 19911 Hackberry Drive in Gretna. Regarding our appeal, we got a letter. Can I use this?
Yes, he'll turn it on for you, and then you can zoom in and out.
Okay, thank you, sir.
If you need
So we got a letter that the middle section was empty. So this is a copy of what I presented to the OPW bid, that the center price that was inaccurate or was left blank. However, I had the totals on the other side. So my appeal is I did not just create just a base bid, which is on the original side. I did actually fill out, well, we filled out the entire total for each individual price. And so I have actually been on last year, I forgot one of my RC compliance. So I've been on that side where I did have an entirely missing document. And it's very frustrating because you do see this side on the taxpayers' money. Like, this is $34,000 that the taxpayers are going to have to pay. But my appeal on this is just that I did actually have each individual item priced per, and so that's where, to me, everything's filled out. It's the price per item is on there. It just wasn't divided individually, so that's my appeal.
So you admit you did not provide a unit price?
I didn't, correct. This is an exact copy of it. I did write each individual. I did not write just a base bid on there. I did write each individual item on there. Yes, sir. This is a copy.
You could stay close. We'll have the city present their side of the appeal.
May I say one more thing? I'm so sorry.
Absolutely.
So in regards to that, and previously, and so we have the City of Omaha contract to remove all of the ash trees as well. And so we have been in contact constantly with them. Regarding Atrium receiving the two bids, item number 37 and number 38. They were actually presented as well to them. They didn't have a certified arborist on site on their payroll, and so they were offered the chance to remedy that situation. And so that would be my appeal, is how can they remedy it? And this one too, again, I'm not able to remedy this when each individual item is on there.
So if I understand your question, is it more specifically, was a part of the bid that you're saying that Atrium got a requirement that they have a certified arborist?
They did, yes, and that came from Dennis Breyer as well. I was on the phone with Dennis Breyer and John Wynn as well from them, because I did actually put a bid for that one as well.
All right, and you're saying they did not have one at the time?
They did not. They had to hire one, sir. Okay. Yes, sir, they did.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll see what we can get addressed for you. Ms. Tippy Pierce, will you be handling this appeal as well?
Heather Tippy Pierce, Public Works. Yeah, I'm hanging in here with y'all. So this is a slightly different situation to probably Council Member Palermo's earlier point. This is also something that electronic bidding could potentially have remedied, and we appreciate your support. We've been actually pursuing options for several years and are getting closer with purchasing department. So we're hoping that we won't have to have these discussions in the future. Per our contract specifications, and I cannot speak to the Parks Department specifications regarding their ability to remedy, our bid prices are specifically, our unit price bids are specifically tied to the unit price, not the extension. So we have very specific contract language that requires the unit price control. And I've got, per Council Members Melton's earlier request, I did bring copies of that. In our instructions to bidders, Article 14, it specifies that the basis of this bid is a unit price bid. It specifies that the bidder, quote, shall submit a bid on a unit price basis for each item of work listed in the unit price section of the bid form, and that we then will take that bid price as the controlling. That's kind of what the paragraph B says, that unit price then controls how we audit the bid and pay the vendor. This is further defined in the general conditions of the contract, where it specifically spells out in A and B kind of how that calculation is made. So in order to be able to pay our vendors, we have to have a unit price provided by the vendor. We, as the city, do not have the authority to back calculate that. And that's for two reasons. One, we don't know what the vendor's intended price was. And two, these are estimated quantities. This is a contract for advance work of what we anticipate we will be undertaking this spring, summer construction season. So if we don't have a unit price, we can't get a final pay price based on actual work completed by the vendor. So that's why we have that language, and that's why we don't have the opportunity to remedy after the bid, because then it would no longer be a level playing field between the bidders. As and I did bring our copy of the vendor's bid, but as she stipulated and showed the council, that unit price section of the bid form was not completed, and it is pretty specifically labeled as, we have, as it was kind of spelled out to be in the general conditions, we have the quantity, price, unit of measure, and then an extension. And all that was provided was the extension. So based on the fact that that controlling value was not provided, and keeping in precedent of previous bids where we've had this situation, the Public Works Department recommends denial of the appeal.
Okay, now if you could just respond to her when she said, well, you can just extrapolate if it's 10 units on item that's $10 and it's priced at $2,575, you can tell the unit price by, even though that's not in the column. So what say you to that argument?
Focus that a little bit. There you go. So that's kind of what I was saying about the unit price controls. We, as the city, reserve the right to correct extension errors by setting the unit price as the controlling value. We do not reserve the right to back calculate into a bid price. That is solely the business of the bidder to provide.
Okay, so let's just say the quantity on the first line item is 60. Are you saying under the contract it's possible they won't get 60? So that's why you need to know the unit price?
They may end up getting, like, a better example is probably when we get into like the clearing and grubbing trees of various diameters.
Mm-hmm.
So they may end up, the award recipient may end up getting, 6 trees of 36 to 48 inch diameter, but maybe 20 trees of 27 to 38, because that's what we encounter in the actual site conditions when we go to do the advanced work.
All right, I get it now. Thank you for that explanation. Mr. Wiesen, did you want to add your recommendation or analysis from the city legal as to what you're advised us to do on this appeal? And if it's similar to the last deal?
Ryan Wiesen, Assistant City Attorney. I would agree with the Public Works Department's recommendation. And I would also add, specifically with the unit price and the extension totals in your question of just a moment ago, I would agree that, again, the unit price controls, and the unit price is what we base the contract value off of. The extensions are just estimates. So for your example of the 60 quantity for the first line item, if we only have, say, 5 of those units that are actually performed over the contract period, we don't want to be in a position where the contractor comes back to us at the end of the term and says, yeah, well, but you owe me an additional $16,000 because my bid was $17,225 for the total amount of services. And that's another reason why the unit price is so important, is because it specifies and it clarifies what the contract value will ultimately be for.
Thank you. Councilmember Harding, you're recognized.
Ryan, I'm sorry. If you could put that chart back up, that was the point I was going to make as well too. Is that, for example, on the first one, if the estimated amount is 60 and it's 17,225, that would mean the unit price would be, I think, $287 and 8 1/3 cents. And again, so if more were, if we ended up doing 70, obviously it would be to the contractor's benefit to have that unit price in there, because then they would be getting paid more. But if it's 50, then they would probably make the claim if the total was 17,225 and they only got paid for 50 of those, the total we would be obligated to would still be that 17,225. So again, that's to emphasize the importance of that unit price. But thank you for putting that back up for that point.
Certainly.
Yeah, and I agree with that. It becomes too loosey-goosey is what you're trying to say, in terms of we're not locking them in, as Councilmember Harding just said.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Melton, you're recognized.
Oh, yeah, and I just want to say, I think I agree, and Amy, I understand you were thinking, well, you could just divide it and it's the same difference. The problem is, it's the enforcement of it. If we accepted that bid, we are accepting the figures on that actual, your final figures, not because the quantities could change. So that's the problem that accepting a bid like that without the unit price would put us in. And again, then the other bidders could also, you can also be sued by the other bidders who say they didn't put that in, and technically maybe they're not the lowest bidder because they didn't put a unit price in. So it actually is more problematic than even just that forgetting to file, one of the forms required, because you get into the pricing and you get into maybe arguing over who's the lowest bidder. So that it does put us in a legal predicament. So I do understand your position, and I appreciate you, by the way, sitting here for this many hours and I wish I could get, I give you a participation trophy for just sitting through our meeting and being the last one up, but that's why we have to do it. And again, just like the previous company, this is more of a legal issue, not how much that, even if we want to save the city money, even if you are the lowest bidder, I do want to save the city money. It could cost the city money a lot more in a potential lawsuit that we'll lose. So unfortunately, that's what we have to do. And I would say, I'm going to concur with everybody else today. Let's get that electronic system in, and by the way, for Heather's sake too. I think it would make her life a lot easier, because I know she doesn't exactly get pleasure in rejecting people's bids. And so I think this would be something that an electronic system definitely would have forced you to put in your unit price, or clarified it, because it probably would have done the unit price and then come out with the end, and then would have made sure that in our last case, that form was uploaded or showing it to him. So, I want to say, I'm sorry, but the law is the law, and we've got to protect the legal rights and legal interests and the bidding requirements that are required by our ordinances that we actually pass. We have to follow our own laws, or else it would be extremely problematic. So I do want to appreciate both of you coming down and just understand. We understand where you're coming from. Wish we could do something, but can't set that precedent. But also understand that we would like to get a system in place. Really would like to get a system in place, so that this doesn't happen to anybody else, especially either one of you or your companies again. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Melton. And then I would just add, before you leave, if you have a business card, our Chief of Staff is Jim Dowding, is over here to my right. He can reach out to the city attorney and who handles the Parks Department issues, and Mr. Briers, and try to get an answer to question on that other matter as to the arborist. Okay? What's the pleasure of council on item 51? Roll call.
Harding. Melton. Palermo. Brennan. Festerson. Gray. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Non-action items, items 52 through 63, do not require a public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on agenda for consideration.
Roll call.
Harding. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Brennan. Festerson. Yes. Gray. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Meeting is adjourned at 5:44.